Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Had Hidden Clan Teammate. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. I was walking through the forest, casually gathering berries and roots. My friend Kimi was gathering fish in the river beside our camp. We had been running from a shadowy man who had been hunting us. We both belonged to a hidden clan that had survived in secret for generations. Kimi was part Neko and a member of the clan. Our clan lived next to the Yukika's territory, but no one knew of our existence because we were completely hidden. Our clan possessed a rare Kekkei Genkai that everyone coveted. We could control the elements, see through most jutsu, and copy other ninjas' techniques, though we could not copy our own clan's unique Kekkei Genkai. I picked up my satchel and walked to the makeshift camp where Kimi had piled the fish and our clothes. Kohaku cried out in excitement at the sight of clean clothes and ran to the pile. Kimi scolded Kohaku but smiled as she did so. Kohaku grabbed her clothes and went into her tent. She pulled on black sage pants, a fishnet shirt that covered part of her arms, and a white v-neck. She bandaged her legs, put on sandals, strapped a weapon pouch to her right leg, and filled it with tools. She gathered her light blonde hair into a high ponytail that fell in waves to the middle of her back and pulled on a neon orange fingerless glove over her right hand and a neon green one over her left. When Kohaku stepped out of her tent and sighed, Kimi shook her head and returned to eating her fish raw. Kohaku expressed her disgust and reminded Kimi that they could not make a fire so close to the hidden leaf village. Kimi dismissed the concern, and Kohaku moved into a stance to use her element-bending skill. She explained to herself that she could bend elements but not create them, and that manipulating elements cost chakra. She searched the earth, produced flint and tinder, and focused the spark into a small flame before holding her fish above it. Kimi teased Kohaku about showing off, and Kohaku laughed, saying Kimi loved her as a sister. They ate in easy companionship until Kohaku sensed something wrong. They exchanged a quick look, stood up, and assumed defensive stances. Needles suddenly flew toward them. Kohaku leapt in front of Kimi and raised an earth shield that caught several of the projectiles. She kept deflecting them until a distant scream drew her attention. When she lowered her guard for a second, a final needle struck a pressure point and Kohaku lost consciousness. Kohaku woke with a stiff neck in a room surrounded by white walls. Electricity crackled in the air as she startled. A boy about her age with hair shaped oddly and an indifferent expression stood nearby. Kohaku introduced herself as Kohaku when asked her name. When asked for a last name, she lied that she did not have one. The boy narrowed his eyes and left without more comment. When Kohaku closed her eyes again, someone entered quietly. Her reflexes reacted first, and she used an earth technique to restrain the newcomer. The newcomer had stark white hair styled to one side, wore a chunin vest, and had a mask covering the lower half of his face and a headband over one eye. Kohaku approached cautiously, lowered his mask, and found him charming in a harmless way. She turned her earth into mud to neutralize his weapons and dropped them to the floor. Kakashi introduced himself when Kohaku asked his name. Kohaku responded with her own name. She picked up a book that had fallen nearby and began to read it. Kimi burst into the room, exclaiming at Kohaku's actions, and Kohaku explained that the newcomer had startled her and that she had defended herself. Kohaku offered the book to Kimi and suggested she read it, but after an awkward moment they agreed to set the book aside. 2 hours later, after settling several awkward moments over the misplaced book, Kakashi led Kohaku and Kimi away to meet the Hokage. He explained that they could remain in the village but would have to enroll in the academy and follow village rules. He also mentioned that there were no open apartments and that Kohaku might have to share living space with someone from the village. Kohaku inwardly complained but accepted the arrangement as long as her roommate was not troublesome. Later, Kohaku walked along a red beam of a bridge, using chakra to keep her feet adhered to the metal as she moved upside down with her hands in her pockets. Kakashi and Kimi talked below her about their next steps. Kohaku made faces at the young ninjas passing beneath her, carefree until Kakashi called for her to get down from the beam. She pretended not to listen until he moved behind her and grabbed her collar. Kohaku mentally cursed at the sudden grab, annoyed at being caught. Kakashi looked at Kohaku as if she were crazy. She shrugged and drifted outward into the open sky. When Kakashi finally brought her back down, Kimi embraced Kohaku and began to cry. Kimi told her regretfully that she had chosen to return to Suna to join the academy there. Kohaku smiled and squealed, unable to be angry about someone else's decision. Kimi admitted, with a shy hesitation, that she had a crush on Gaara. Kohaku recalled that they had lived in Suna for a while and had grown close to the siblings there until Kohaku's secret ability had been discovered. Because of that, they had been forced to leave. Kohaku teased Kimi gently, then got down on her knees and made a playful, light-hearted plea on her sister's behalf that was quickly shrugged off. Kimi laughed, smacked Kohaku's head, and they both laughed together. Kimi gave a meaningful goodbye and disappeared into the depths of the village. Kohaku sighed, stuck her hands in her pockets, and let Kakashi think she would listen. Instead she bolted, the rush of freedom making her giddy, until Kakashi's hand caught her collar once more. Kohashi huffed and crossed her arms, then allowed Kakashi to walk with her. After a long walk during which Kohaku chatted and tried to distract herself, Kakashi dropped her off in the academy classroom beside a boy her height with spiky hair, blue eyes, and small markings on his cheeks. Kohaku landed on her backside with a soft oof, causing him to turn and look. Kohaku introduced herself with a confident smile. The boy returned a tentative smile, appearing guarded. Irika, the brown-haired sensei, announced that everyone would practice the transformation technique for the quiz and told them to line up. Kohaku pulled on the sleeve of the boy beside her and introduced herself as the new student Kohaku. Irika explained that since she was in that class she would have to take the quiz. Kohaku agreed casually and was instructed to stand behind the blonde-haired boy, Naruto. Everything proceeded calmly until Naruto performed his transformation jutsu. The jutsu produced a surprising, attention-grabbing decoy that caused an uproar in the room and left Irika momentarily flustered. Many of the students reacted with shocked or embarrassed expressions. Kohaku laughed so hard she had to clutch her stomach, and Irika tried to restore order. Irika asked Kohaku if she was ready to proceed. She quieted her laughter, stepped forward, performed the hand signs, and transformed into Irika. Kohaku admitted to herself that being in someone else's body felt odd, like slipping into someone else's shoes and stumbling, and then she released the jutsu and returned to her spot beside the quiet, dark-haired boy who rarely spoke. The reserved boy, Sasuke, asked in his usual monotone what she had told Irika. Kohaku teased that if she answered, he might have nightmares. Before the exchange could continue, a chorus of girls in the classroom reacted excitedly to Sasuke's presence. Kohaku, having mastered a perfect impression of Sasuke's voice, slipped behind him and imitated him in a teasing way that sent the surrounding girls into a flurry of admiration and promises to show their appreciation with gifts. The girls rushed out in a gleeful commotion, and Kohaku walked away whistling cheerfully. Sasuke demanded to know why she had done that. Kohaku answered, almost sing-song, that she had grown bored of being squashed in the crowd, then slipped behind Naruto and used him as a shield. Naruto gave her a confused, almost protective look. Kohaku smiled and hid behind his shoulder until she fell asleep on his back. Kohaku woke with a start as the remnants of a nightmare, replaying in the back of her mind, faded. She shivered as memories of her clan's destruction resurfaced from the depths of her memory. She rolled off the pillow and turned to the side. Kohaku's face hit the cold floor because of her laziness. A loud, obnoxious voice asked if she was okay. She looked up and met Naruto's bright blue eyes. Kohaku blushed as her cheeks grew redder by the second. Kohaku reassured him that she was fine and joked that she was simply giving the floor some attention. Naruto laughed quietly and offered his hand. When Kohaku took it, a small spark of electricity seemed to pass between them. Naruto pulled her up, and Kohaku thanked him, calling him bro with a gentle smile. Irika then explained that a clone jutsu was required to pass the exam and become a genin. Kohaku admitted that she had not been paying close attention and turned to the window, only to see Naruto beginning to panic. Kohaku placed a hand on his shoulder and asked if he was all right. Naruto murmured that he was nervous because he felt terrible at the jutsu. Kohaku encouraged him to stop worrying and try his best. Naruto's eyes widened briefly and then closed into a wide smile. Kohaku returned the smile before being called in. Kohaku entered a small room with Irika and another instructor and, after a sigh, quickly created 5 clones. Irika praised Kohaku and announced that she was now a genin, presenting her with a black headband bearing the leaf symbol. Kohaku exclaimed in surprise that she had wanted it in black and hugged Irika enthusiastically. Irika explained, half embarrassed, that blue headbands had run out. Kohaku teased that Irika must just like her, and Irika reddened and fumbled for words as Kohaku left. Outside among the crowd, Kohaku moved through people until she spotted Naruto sitting alone on a swing. She hurried toward him but tripped dramatically in midair and landed at his feet. Naruto looked down at her with confusion and asked if it was really her name. Kohaku warned him not to use her name too often and smiled as Naruto blushed. She noticed sadness in his eyes as he watched the other students receive congratulations and praise and asked what was wrong. Naruto insisted it was nothing, trying to appear cheerier than he felt. Kohaku urged him to confide in a friend, and Naruto, surprised, asked if she wanted to be his friend. Kohaku replied that she could be whatever he needed and allowed her to line her words when she asked why he would doubt that. Naruto confessed that he had always wanted a friend but that others ignored him or treated him with contempt. Kohaku saw that many students were indeed looking at Naruto with disdain. She scowled and made a rude gesture at them, which caused the offended students to avert their eyes. Kohaku declared that they could be best friends, throwing her hands in the air. Naruto began to muse quietly about the idea of them as best friends. Kohaku stood in a heroic stance and outlined what best friends did: protect one another, talk to each other, train together, and cause mischief together. Naruto smiled at the speech, took Kohaku's gloved hand, and shook it. He agreed to the deal. Naruto then sighed and admitted that he had not passed the exam. Kohaku sprang up and hugged him tightly, telling him not to be sad. Naruto worried that he was not any closer to his dream. Kohaku asked what his dream was, and Naruto declared that he wanted to become the greatest Hokage so people would acknowledge him. Kohaku told Naruto that his dream was wonderful and that he would achieve it, but that failure would be part of the journey to success. Naruto smiled and hugged her again, thanking her for being a good friend. Kohaku replied that she was glad to be his friend. A Jonin appeared before them, wearing the standard Jonin outfit with longer dark hair and a bandage across the top of his nose. The Jonin informed Kohaku that the Hokage had summoned her, and when she asked what for, he mentioned that the Hokage had anticipated that question. It concerned her living arrangements. Kohaku brought a finger to her chin to think. Naruto broke the silence by offering that she could live with him, explaining that there was plenty of room and that she did not have to if she did not want to. Kohaku smiled and said she would consider the offer. She joked that she should not make the Hokage angry by being late, and Naruto nodded, hopeful. The Jonin used a teleportation technique to take Kohaku to the Hokage's office. As they traveled, Kohaku mulled over Naruto's invitation. She decided she would take him up on it. Living with someone unknown felt risky, and Naruto, despite his habit of pranks, seemed like a good person and a true friend. In the Hokage's office, the Hokage informed Kohaku that a decision had been made about where she would stay. When Kohaku asked who had offered, the Hokage smiled and revealed that Naruto Uzumaki had volunteered to take her in. Kohaku's POV. The Hokage announced that Kohaku surely knew him and that his name was Naruto Uzumaki. Kohaku felt her eyes widen and smiled faintly at the thought of living with someone she at least recognized. She imagined how it would be to share a home with Naruto and found her smile growing. Kohaku interrupted the Hokage to declare firmly that she would live with Naruto. The Hokage responded with a faint smile and said it seemed she was determined. He explained that he hoped Kohaku could help show others that Naruto was not a bad person and asked why people treated Naruto with such coldness. The Hokage sighed and explained that 12 years earlier the nine-tailed fox had been unleashed and devastated much of the village. No one could stop it until the fourth Hokage sealed the creature inside a newborn, using the infant's umbilical cord as part of the sealing. That baby was Naruto, and because the fox demon was sealed within him, the shinobi who knew about it despised him. Their hatred had spread through the villagers and been passed down to their children, often without anyone fully understanding why. Kohaku sniffled and stood up, protesting that people should not despise Naruto. She insisted that he had saved the village and should be honored, not treated like an outcast. The Hokage told her that the fourth had wanted everyone to regard Naruto as a hero and had made that his last wish. Kohaku wondered aloud why people did not follow such a simple wish. The Hokage answered that people were frightened that Naruto might not be able to control the demon inside him, that the fox could reappear and resume its destruction. Kohaku found the fear petty compared to Naruto's clear strength, inside and out. Kohaku said it still did not make sense. The Hokage explained that one reason he was placing Kohaku with Naruto was that she was one of the few who believed in him and could give him hope. Kohaku asked what he meant by hope. The Hokage answered that Naruto had never really had someone to celebrate his successes and correct him when he was wrong. He had never truly felt wanted. Kohaku reacted with surprise at the idea that Naruto might desire such simple, human things. The Hokage mentioned that Naruto and teacher Iruka were at the ramen stand and that they would join them soon. He handed Kohaku her backpack, explaining that it had likely been taken to the hospital when she was treated. Kohaku blushed a little, slung the strap over her shoulder, and the bag settled on her back. The Hokage noted that she seemed happy, and Kohaku confessed that she was glad to be staying with her first friend in the Leaf Village. A comfortable silence fell between them as they walked toward the ramen shop. With each step her smile widened and her heart quickened. Kohaku could not explain why she felt something stirring when her blue eyes met Naruto's warm blue gaze. When they reached the ramen stand, the Hokage pointed Naruto out. Kohaku ran toward him with a closed-eyed grin and greeted him loudly, drawing a few curious looks from passers-by. Naruto turned, surprise widening his features, and they collided in an embrace. Kohaku wrapped her arms around him and did not let go until Naruto returned the hug. They lingered in the embrace for a while before breaking apart, cheeks flushed but still smiling. Naruto excitedly revealed that he had passed the test and received his ninja headband with the leaf symbol. Kohaku cheered that she had known he could do it. Naruto then asked her to share her news. Kohaku said that she was not officially moving in with him yet, which made Naruto smile wider as he drew her into another warm hug. Kohaku briefly buried her face in his chest before relaxing into the moment. Naruto laughed that his news paled in comparison to hers. Kohaku joked that the best kind of news would be a rain of Paki, nodding toward the darkening sky. Naruto agreed, and then they bade farewell to teacher Iruka. Teacher Iruka smiled with a mix of pride and lingering concern as they parted. Kohaku worried that she might have done something wrong and decided she would ask him tomorrow. Naruto grabbed her hand and led her along, explaining how to get to his apartment in case she got lost. Both of them flushed briefly, then recovered as he pulled her along. After Naruto finished giving directions, they arrived at his apartment. He produced a key, opened the door, and let her in. Kohaku had expected the worst but was relieved to find it only a little messy. Naruto apologized for the clutter, and Kohaku laughed and hugged a nearby wall in amusement, insisting that it was perfect and that she already felt at home. Naruto said he would get ready for bed and stepped away. Kohaku changed into penguin pajama pants and a tank top, let her ponytail down, and stepped out of the bathroom to find Naruto waiting. She greeted him playfully, and he blushed before taking her hand again and showing her to the guest bedroom. He asked if the room was okay, and Kohaku flung herself onto the bed, declaring it perfect. Naruto smiled, thanked her for staying, and wished her a good night before closing the door. Kohaku smiled, turned over, and snuggled into the covers. She rolled over when someone called her name with a rapid knock on the door. Kohaku groaned and rolled toward the sound. Someone insisted they had to hurry to the academy for placement on a team. Kohaku hushed the caller and teased that it was early. A louder voice then shouted to wake her, and Kohaku sat up so quickly that she tumbled out of bed and into Naruto's arms. She greeted him, he blushed, and after setting her down he left the room. Kohaku packed, dressed, and finished getting ready. She ate toast with Nutella while watching Naruto fuss with his headband. She suggested that he wear his forehead protector since he had earned it, and Naruto agreed, tying it around his forehead before they headed out. They dashed through the village with high spirits, calling out that they would show everyone how strong they could be. Villagers and other shinobi watched them run by with bemused expressions. At the academy, they sat together while a crowd formed around Naruto. A man complained that only those who had passed the exam should be there, and Kohaku answered by pointing out Naruto's forehead protector. A taller girl with pink hair pushed through the crowd and stood in front of them with her hands on her hips. Kohaku noted immediately that she did not like the girl, at least for now. Naruto seemed captivated by the newcomer, and Kohaku felt an unexpected twinge of jealousy at his reaction. To distract herself, Kohaku hummed to a tune and lost herself for a moment until someone shoved her playfully. She leaped behind Naruto, startled by the attempt to scare her. The pink-haired girl muttered something and touched her own forehead, then sat down. Kohaku swapped seats with Naruto and watched as Naruto climbed onto a desk and stared intensely at a brooding classmate. The other girls cheered, and Kohaku teased about the intense staring contest while pulling out a bag of popcorn. The situation took a sudden awkward turn when a classmate bumped into Naruto and the two had an uncomfortable, flustered moment that sent Kohaku into peals of laughter. The mood shifted when the pink-haired girl snapped and accused Naruto of being annoying. The exchange left Naruto looking shaken. That tension escalated into a brief scuffle, and Naruto ended up knocked down and hurt in the rough tumble. Kohaku sighed, ignored the instructor's rebuke, and used medical jutsu to heal him. After she finished healing him, there was nothing to do about pride. She sighed and turned back to Instructor Irika. He gave a confused look and continued the roster announcement, naming Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Hanuro, and Sasuke Uchiha for Team 7, and then adding Kohaku to even the numbers. She kept a straight face and smirked. This was going to be fun. Instructor Irika dismissed them for lunch, and Kohaku quickly hopped up to the roofs, eating an apple as she watched the clouds and wondered what else the day would bring. Kohaku's point of view. Kohaku lay upside down, studying her new teammates. Sakura looked down and seemed distracted, while Naruto and Sasuke exchanged cold glares. She shrugged, then produced an electric guitar from midair with a summoning technique and cradled it like a prized companion. The guitar had an orange copper body with black trim and dark frames at the bottom. She slid the strap over her shoulders, positioned her hands on the right strings, and began to play. She sang quiet, tense lyrics about a hidden side and a caged beast she could not control. The melody was raw and fragile, and Kohaku shut her eyes as she poured feeling into the notes. When she realized she had an audience, she stopped and blushed. Sakura complimented the performance, and Naruto cheered enthusiastically, while Sasuke offered only a curt sound of acknowledgement. Kohaku pouted, walked over to Sasuke, and poked his head repeatedly until he snapped at her. She crowed that she had gotten him to speak, and he turned away, annoyed. Kohaku nearly burst out laughing when Naruto tried the old trick of wedging an eraser in the door to catch their instructor, but Sakura protested in mock outrage while clearly enjoying the prank. Naruto explained that this was payback for the teacher being late. The other teams had already left. Sasuke dismissed the idea that a high-ranking ninja would fall for such a trap. A hand appeared at the door, the eraser fell, and their instructor took the full hit. Kohaku laughed at the stunned look on the man's face, then froze when she recognized him as Kakashi Hatake. She banged her head against the table in exasperation. Kakashi surveyed them and dryly remarked that his first impression was not flattering. He called them idiots. Their irritation flared and was quickly punctuated by his own comedic head rub. Kohaku finally stopped banging her head and followed the others up to the roof. Kakashi announced that they would introduce themselves. Kohaku asked what he wanted to know, and Kakashi said he wanted likes, dislikes, dreams, and such. Naruto insisted that Kakashi start with himself, and Kakashi gave his name and little else about personal preferences, brushing off the question with a weary tone. Kohaku then turned to Naruto. Naruto said his name, declared his love of cup ramen and how happy he was when Instructor Irika treated him, admitted he disliked waiting for his ramen to cook, and stated that his dream was to surpass the village leader and earn recognition from the villagers. Kohaku listened with a proud smile. Kakashi appeared surprised. Naruto added that pranks were one of his hobbies. Sasuke introduced himself next. He spoke with a flat tone and said he had few likes and many dislikes. He framed his goal as an ambition rather than a dream, to restore his clan and to confront a certain man responsible for its destruction. Sakura blushed at the mention, Naruto looked anxious, and Kakashi appeared displeased. Kohaku teased that reconstructing a clan would not be a simple matter, and Sasuke grew irritated at the misunderstanding. Kakashi moved on to the girls. Sakura gave her name and repeatedly glanced at Sasuke, smiling shyly. She playfully declared her dislike for Naruto and Kohaku, which prompted Naruto to withdraw sullenly while Kohaku patted him on the back. Kakashi turned his attention to Kohaku. Kohaku introduced herself and then asked a serious question. Could she trust them, since past betrayals had made her cautious about sharing personal information? Naruto urged her to speak, and Kohaku revealed that she intended to share her last name only after they promised not to tell anyone. Everyone nodded, and Kohaku took a breath and prepared to speak her full name. Kohaku Munrado introduced herself. Kakashi muttered the name of the Yosugan, and Kohaku nodded. Kohaku ordered everyone to tell no one. They all nodded. Kohaku then listed what she liked and disliked. Kohaku said that she liked the color orange, Pocky, the food Kimi made, living with her best friend, gaming, reading, writing, people she could trust, being a little wild, singing and playing rock and roll, her guitar, her katana, animals, peanut butter, Kimi's sake and ramen. Kohaku said that she disliked hypocrites, fakes, rude people, cheaters, backstabbers, rogues, people who judged others too quickly, and being without her sister Kimi. Kohaku explained that her dream was to become head of the clan with her sister and to restore their clan's honor. She smiled and waited for it all to sink in. Kakashi asked if they were still alive. Kohaku replied that only she and Kimi remained, and she ignored Sasuke's stare. Kohaku gave Naruto a look that meant she would explain later. Naruto nodded. Kakashi quickly recovered and began speaking again. Kakashi announced that since introductions were finished, their duties as shinobi would begin. Tomorrow. Naruto responded with impatient excitement. Kakashi said they would do something together with the five of them. When Naruto and Kohaku asked what it was, Kakashi explained that it would be survival training. Kohaku cheered at the news. Kakashi clarified that this would not be normal training, he would be their opponent this time. Naruto laughed and rejoiced at that. Sakura asked what was so funny, and Kakashi began to answer, but Kohaku tuned him out as she started humming a tune called Monster and used her energy to shape the earth into different forms in a playful display. A piece of paper was then moved into her face. Kakashi handed Kohaku a paper containing the details of the survival training. Kohaku skimmed it quickly as Kakashi warned them not to eat tomorrow or they might become sick. Kohaku grunted inwardly. She did not plan to follow that advice but decided to pack some extra supplies in case the others did not bring food. She yawned, teleported home, and fell asleep on something warm. Kohaku's POV. Kohaku teleported to the house and landed on something warm and comfortable. She curled up and fell asleep, holding onto the warmth as it shifted beneath her until she dozed more deeply. She missed Kimi and wished her sister were here. They were not exactly blood-related, but their families had been close allies and had led the clan together. Kohaku and Kimi had been groomed to take on the clan's duties, but not long ago a jealous uncle attacked and destroyed their clan to gain more power. Kohaku believed true strength came from protecting the people you cared about. She regretted that he had not realized that sooner. He had wanted to become the village leader, and when their clan refused him he attacked, and his assault wiped out many she had cared for. He later aligned himself with others. Kohaku pushed the dark thoughts away and let herself sleep. She woke to an embarrassing realization that she had fallen asleep beside Naruto and, flushed, retreated to her room to get dressed and collect herself. She changed into fresh clothes, tied her hair into twin ponytails and fastened her forehead protector. She pulled on her neon fingerless gloves, gathered her scroll that held a katana and her guitar, and filled the pouches on her right leg with throwing knives and throwing stars. With a determined nod, she headed out. Kohaku met Naruto and felt a faint blush when he laughed. Her heart beat a little faster, but she focused on the task ahead. They ran together to the meeting place their teacher had specified. They arrived at the same time as Sasuke and Sakura. Kohaku thought Sasuke and Sakura might make a good match, although Sasuke remained distant as usual. Naruto and Sasuke began bickering while Kohaku slid to the ground and brought out her guitar, beginning to play a familiar tune and discreetly enjoying a snack stick. Naruto complained aloud about their teacher's absence and Sakura scolded him while giving his head a light punch. Kakashi suddenly appeared, greeting them with his usual casual manner and a playfully exasperated expression. Kohaku watched him and felt the familiar mix of annoyance and affection that his antics always provoked. Kakashi revealed a clock set for noon and explained the exercise. He described 3 bells and told them that their mission was to take a bell from him before time ran out. Anyone who failed to take a bell would miss lunch. One person would end up tied to a stump. He allowed the use of throwing stars and knives but warned that they needed to come prepared and determined. Sakura protested that he would be in danger, and Kohaku agreed with her concern. Naruto bristled and declared his confidence loudly, which only made Kohaku worry that he might get hurt. Kakashi reminded them to focus and to start only when he said so. Naruto, unable to contain himself, lunged early, but Kakashi grabbed his hand and stopped him before any real harm could be done. Kohaku felt her temper flare at the move but forced herself to calm down, fingers hovering near the handle of a throwing knife. Kakashi observed their readiness with a hint of approval and then announced the start of the exercise. Kohaku formed the required hand seal and slipped into a nearby tree, masking her energy. She directed subtle energy to her feet so she could move silently and considered the best camouflage for the forest. Leaves were the obvious choice. She dislodged just enough leaves from the branches to be unnoticed and guided them to cling to her clothes and skin, arranging them so she could move freely without being seen. Satisfied, she moved closer to where Kakashi had positioned himself, blending seamlessly into the foliage and preparing to act. Kohaku silently landed on a branch and saw Kakashi behind Naruto with his hands forming the tiger seal. Her heart skipped as Kakashi moved his hands closer. Kakashi shouted the name of the technique Hidden Leaf Ancient Taijutsu, 1,000 Years of Pain, and performed a prank-like strike that sent Naruto plunging into the water. Kohaku noticed Kakashi laughing in that familiar, mischievous way and chided herself for getting distracted. When Naruto did not surface right away, Kohaku grew worried. She scanned the water from her perch and was about to jump in when Naruto finally came up and hauled himself ashore. Kohaku breathed a sigh of relief, then heard him say he was hungry. Kohaku reached into her pocket and produced food pills, deciding to give them each 2 to ease their hunger. She created a shadow clone with her armor on and dropped from the tree to search for Sakura's chakra. It was difficult to sense because Kohaku did not fully know Sakura's signature and because Sakura concealed it well. Kohaku abandoned the chakra search and instead pressed her palm to the ground, looking for unusual vibrations and heat signatures. She located Sakura under 2 bushes a short distance away. Just as she was about to lift her hand from the soil, she felt a vibration like a herd of elephants and saw Naruto struggling with one of his own clones nearby. Kohaku wondered what that was about and refocused on the mission. Kohaku moved silently to Sakura and tapped her shoulder gently. Sakura jumped and screamed. Kohaku masked the noise with a bird call and eased the reaction with a subtle genjutsu. Kohaku then informed Sakura that Kakashi did not know she was there and that she had brought something. Sakura asked what it was, and Kohaku explained that she had brought food pills because Sakura looked hungry. Sakura thanked her. Kohaku proposed that if they worked together they could take the bells from Kakashi, asking Sakura to team up. Sakura declined, saying she had to prove herself to Sasuke, and walked away. Kohaku frowned and ran off to find Sasuke. Kohaku found Sasuke moving between the trees and landed in front of him. She asked if he wanted to work together to get the bells, but Sasuke replied that he worked with no one because others would only slow him down, and he walked off. Kohaku noted that her team had teamwork issues and worried about how that might cause trouble later. She decided to try Naruto once more. She found Naruto dangling upside down, caught in a bubei trap. Kohaku called to him and asked if he wanted to team up. Naruto refused, explaining that he needed to show Sasuke and Kakashi how capable he was and that he did not want to rely on anyone. Kohaku sighed, helped him free himself from the rope, and received his thanks before another nearby trap triggered. She pretended not to notice and walked into the forest, wondering why no one wanted to team up with her. She adjusted her forehead protector and looked ahead, then froze when she saw Sasuke trapped in the ground. Kohaku burst out laughing at Sasuke's predicament, and Sasuke glared at her, demanding that she stop laughing and get him out. Kohaku barely suppressed her amusement. Sasuke insisted he did not need her help and told her to go away. Kohaku shrugged, picked up an unconscious Sakura, and leaned her against a tree. She tried to wake Sakura by poking, then slapped her harder until Sakura jerked awake, glared, and then fainted again at the sight of Sasuke. Kohaku sighed, hoisted Sakura over her shoulder, and ignored Sasuke's grunts as she concentrated on keeping her balance. Looking up at the sky, Kohaku realized her time to attempt to take the bells from Kakashi was approaching. She set Sakura down and made her comfortable, then created a clone to guard her. Kohaku walked into a small clearing and called to Kakashi, asking him to come down and face her. Kakashi appeared from the treetops and asked how she had known he was there. Kohaku said she had methods she could not reveal. When Kakashi's bells moved, Kohaku shifted to the right and extended her hand. A kunai he threw grazed her hand. She rolled a scroll, used the wound to seal it, and completed the seals on the ground to prepare a summoning. Kakashi reached for his own scrolls, surprised by her move. Kohaku lifted her hand and drew her katana, teasing him about the possibility of summoning a demon and noting his startled reaction. She focused on his bells and charged at him with a battle cry. The blade of her katana met the blade of his kunai. Kohaku smiled at him and pushed with her blade, sending him flying backward. She charged again, but instead of swinging her sword she dropped to her knees and slid beneath him. She reached out and tapped the bells so they jingled. He heard them and slapped her hand before jumping back. Kohaku pouted but stood up. It would have been easier if the others had distracted him or grabbed the bells. Suddenly she realized why he had set things up this way. Since no one wanted to help, Kohaku decided she would handle it alone. She smirked and charged again, repeating the same trick but moving to his opposite side. He punched her backwards, sending her skidding a few feet. Kohaku grinned and kept her hand hidden behind her back. He spoke casually that she should not be happy because she had not gotten the bells. Kohaku revealed that she had something and pulled her hand away to show a book. His eyes widened when he saw that the book was his new Icha novel. He begged for mercy, crying dramatically as Kohaku pretended to drop the book into a puddle she had made. Kohaku said cheerfully that she would only give him any mercy if he gave her what she wanted. He hesitated, sweating, then tossed her the bells at the same moment she tossed the book. Once she had the bells, Kohaku quickly hid them while he clutched his book. She felt awkward but moved over to Sakura. Kohaku slipped a bell into Sakura's pocket, then went to where Sasuke lay nearby. She smirked, tapped him on the head, and slipped a bell into his pocket before setting him upright and using a quick patch-up to wake him. He roused, looked around in confusion, and walked off. Kohaku came out from her hiding spot behind a tree. Now it was time to find Naruto. Kohaku scanned the area until she saw him by the trunks, tied up while Kakashi stood nearby. Her eyes widened when a bell jingled. She had to act quickly. She casually walked up to them and slipped a bell into Naruto's pocket as he kicked and yelled that it wasn't fair and to believe it. Kakashi muttered that he did believe it, at least he did. Kohaku drifted for a moment in thought, and then Sasuke and Sakura appeared. Kohaku thought it was about time and felt a cheeky satisfaction. She sat in front of Naruto and eyed the 3 lunch boxes hungrily. 3 stomachs growled behind her, and she felt a sweat of embarrassment at the reminder that the food pills had not been enough. Kohaku noted aloud that they looked hungry. Kohaku asked them not to remind her, then told them not to worry about the academy because, in a deliberately harsh joke, she suggested they should quit being shinobi. Naruto reacted in shock, asking how they could quit being ninjas. Kohaku continued in the same blunt mood, calling them punks who should not be ninjas, but Sasuke suddenly charged at Naruto. In an instant, Kakashi had landed on top of Sasuke, pinning him with his foot and holding his hands down. Kohaku pointed out with a laugh that Sasuke was getting walked all over. Sakura immediately protested that they could not treat Sasuke that way. Kakashi then explained that they did not understand the reason they had been placed in teams. He said that their confusion showed they did not know the answer to the test. Sakura asked what he meant, and Kakashi said they needed that answer to pass. Kohaku asked if Kakashi would tell them, and Kakashi muttered to himself for a moment. Naruto then shouted for the answer, impatient as always. Kakashi declared that the answer was teamwork. Kohaku thought she might have guessed it, though she admitted she had only realized after getting the bells from Kakashi. She noted, with a smug little smile, that if the four of them had worked together they might have retrieved the bells without fighting. Sakura pointed out that there were only 3 bells and 4 of them, which would naturally cause conflict. Kohaku acknowledged that Sakura had a point. Kakashi explained that the test had been designed to cause conflict and to see whether they would set aside personal interests to work together. He criticized Sakura for focusing on Sasuke instead of helping Naruto, Naruto for running around alone, and Sasuke for looking down on his teammates. Then Kakashi turned his attention to Kohaku and observed that she had actually been one of the better ones among them. She had asked for help but had not pushed for it and instead took matters into her own hands. At that moment, the bells jingled as everyone shifted and discovered them in their pockets. Sakura reacted with surprise as she found a bell in her pocket. Kohaku admitted, eyes closed in a smug smile, that Kakashi had been right and that she had taken things into her own hands. Naruto urged Kohaku that she could not do that to herself and that she had to pass as well. Kohaku replied that while everyone had to pass, friends came first for her. Kakashi agreed that she had a point about teamwork. You had to use it to keep the whole team safe, because acting only as an individual could disrupt teamwork and put a comrade in danger. To illustrate, Kakashi produced a kunai in a quick demonstration and used it to emphasize his point, then called out to Sakura, prompting her to react immediately. A voice declared that Naruto must be killed or Sasuke would die. Naruto searched frantically and when his eyes found the narrator, he pleaded for help. The narrator set their jaw and nodded, stepping into a fighting stance. Kakashi explained that if a hostage were taken they would have to make difficult choices and risk their lives. He stepped away from Sasuke, which eased the tension around them. He continued speaking, but the narrator could only focus on the line about risking their lives. Years earlier, the narrator remembered being 8 years old and causing mischief with Kimi. They pulled pranks on their clan and ran with their faces covered in Gramps cookies, laughing as they fled. The clan was usually cheerful and forgiving. They even made extra clothes when things got messy. While they paused to chew and plan their next prank, the narrator noticed their uncle limping by, looking battered as if he had been in a fight. Kimi cowered behind the narrator, still uneasy around the uncle, and the narrator wondered what had happened. The uncle warned them that following him would be dangerous and that they would be risking their lives. Kimi jumped at the voice, lowered her ears, and hid again. The narrator laughed nervously and asked who said they would follow. The uncle grunted, turned away, and staggered off toward the sunset, not expected to return until the moon touched the lake. Back in the present, Kakashi's comment about a best friend's name being carved on the KIA stone pulled the narrator out of the memory. Kakashi noted that his best friend's name was there as well. Then he told them he would give them one more chance and that things would get harder after lunch. He allowed those who wanted another try to eat, but he ordered them not to give any food to Naruto. Naruto protested loudly, but Kakashi explained the consequence for breaking the rule and then teleported away. Naruto insisted he did not need food, but his stomach betrayed him with a loud growl. Sakura handed out lunchboxes and the narrator directed Naruto to open his mouth. Naruto obeyed shakily while the others looked on in confusion. The narrator used chopsticks to feed him rice, and Naruto attempted to speak but only managed a muffled sound. The narrator hushed him and urged him to eat quickly or risk losing the food. Naruto nodded and began to chew. The narrator laughed softly and offered more. Sakura asked what they were doing. Sasuke held out his lunchbox to Naruto in a flat, emotionless way. Sakura stared at him as if he were mad. Sasuke explained in a quiet, steady tone that he was giving Naruto his food. The narrator made a private joke behind Sasuke's back, and Naruto laughed. Sakura reminded them of Kakashi's warning, but Sasuke reasoned that they needed everyone's strength and that a hungry Naruto would not be able to fight effectively. The narrator made a silly gesture, which earned a glare from Sakura and more laughter from Naruto. Sakura then offered her food as well, and soon half of the group's plates ended up on the narrators. They all pressured the narrator into feeding Naruto, who thanked them with a bright smile. The narrator fed themselves and noticed Naruto watching closely. A brief blush rose on their cheeks, but they continued. A sudden loud bang and a cloud of smoke made them all jump. Kakashi reappeared, stern-faced, and declared that they had all passed. He lectured them that those who broke the rules were scum, but those who neglected their comrades were worse. He announced that as of tomorrow, Team 7 would begin their missions. The narrator cheered with Naruto. Afterward, the narrator went to retrieve a necklace hidden in the grass behind the posts. Not long after, Naruto cried out in frustration at being tied up. The narrator laughed and reassured him that they were there, then used a kunai to cut the ropes and let him slide to the ground. When the last rope fell away, Naruto pulled the narrator into a tight, grateful hug. He thanked the narrator, who smiled as Naruto took their hand and led them back toward home. They walked home together, the day settling into a quiet close. Then there was a giant hole in the highway where the dirt underneath had washed away, causing the whole thing to crumble. To me it looked like a gigantic pile of chaos and excitement. I was a violent, disruptive kind of girl. I sat in the grass with a cat in my lap. We were on a mission, although I had forgotten the details. Our missions always felt like busy work chores people were too lazy to do. Kimi and I had done worse things just to survive in the forest, and Kimi was the best fighter I had ever seen. Kakashi checked the distance to the target in my ear, and I realized the little microphone was on. Kakashi asked how far the target was, and I heard Naruto complain about his impatience. Kakashi then asked if I was ready, and I thought about it for a moment before replying with a light joke that made everyone groan and laugh. Suddenly an orange flash landed on top of me. I held the cat up to keep her safe as the impact knocked me onto the ground. I groaned and slowly opened my eyes. Naruto was right over me. He had accidentally fallen on top of me, and he quickly apologized and stood up. He reached out a hand to help me up, blushing with embarrassment, and I took it. We both blushed and then jumped back as Sasuke's voice came from behind us. Sasuke demanded to know what had happened, and we both assured him nothing important had occurred. Naruto then took the cat and held her, but the cat fought back and scratched him. The cat's attacks were frantic and energetic. Naruto soon had several scratches and a shocked expression. Sakura and Sasuke confirmed the target, and Kakashi acknowledged the mission complete. As we started walking back, the cat lunged at Naruto again. Naruto complained about the cat's behavior, and I took the cat from him. The cat immediately relaxed and curled up in my arms, purring. I explained that I had experience handling cats. Naruto pouted, convinced the cat disliked him. I offered consolation and hugged him briefly to cheer him up. He returned the small, friendly hug and smiled. We let go and saw the rest of the group had already gone on without us, so we called and ran to catch up. Later, Naruto handed the cat to the Fire Lord's wife, who took the cat and held it tightly to her chest. The gesture startled the cat and explained why it had run away before. Naruto muttered as he rubbed at the scratches, and I chuckled slightly while glancing toward the Hokage. The Hokage announced Kakashi's team, Team 7, had their next duties: go shopping in the next village, help with potato digging, and babysit. I groaned and rested my arm over my head. More chores. Naruto loudly protested that he wanted a better mission than the ones we kept receiving. Irika scolded them both, reminding them that they had just become genin and that D-ranked missions were appropriate. Kakashi intervened by tapping Naruto and me on the heads to quiet us, and Naruto and I argued about food and missions until the Hokage spoke again and the group settled back into their routine. Kohaku wondered if they were about to kiss. She could feel the warm breath near her lips, an end-to-me moment that left her flushed and uncertain. The Hokage offered them a C-ranked mission and explained that it was a protection assignment for a certain person. Kohaku and Naruto reacted with excited disbelief at the C rank. Naruto demanded to know whether the protected person was a feudal lord, a noble, or a princess. Kohaku begged for something sillier, blurted a request for a llama, and then shrugged as if talking about the weather. The Hokage simply shook his head. Naruto and Kohaku shared a brief laugh. Sakura watched Kohaku with an unreadable expression. The Hokage called someone in, And shortly after an older, somewhat disheveled man swaggered into the room and leaned against the doorway. He sneered at the young shinobi and asked whether they were really ninjas, insulting the shorter members of the group. Naruto reacted angrily and lunged after the man. Kakashi grabbed Naruto and held him back, asking what purpose there would be in harming the person they were assigned to protect. The old man introduced himself as Tazuna, a bridge builder, and said he expected their protection until he reached his country and finished the bridge. The team accepted the assignment and began preparations for the trip. Kohaku folded her clothes into neat piles and packed them into her backpack, adding pajamas, books, and personal items before securing the bag. She tucked garments away, slung the straps over her shoulders, and packed her scrolls, kunai, shuriken, and other tools. As she stepped out of her room, she collided with Naruto Uzumaki. Her heart sped when his bright blue eyes met hers. Naruto asked if she was ready, his excitement making a smile impossible to resist. Kohaku admitted she was ready, and Naruto shouted his enthusiasm while Kohaku matched his energy. They ran together toward the village gates, laughing. Kohaku asked Naruto why he seemed so thrilled. Naruto explained that it was his first time leaving the village. Kohaku had assumed others had explored the nearby forests, so she had been surprised. They rejoined the rest of their team. Kohaku listened as Naruto and Tazuna spoke when Sakura pulled Kohaku aside. Sakura greeted her and then asked about the relationship between Kohaku and Naruto. Kohaku denied that anything was happening between them, and Sakura pressed the point. Naruto, meanwhile, again attempted to confront Tazuna in a burst of temper, prompting exasperated reactions from those around him. Kohaku took Sakura a little to the side and asked her to keep a confidence. Sakura promised not to tell anyone. Kohaku admitted, quietly and with difficulty, that she might have a crush on Naruto. Sakura squealed with delight and hugged her, causing surprised looks from the others. Kohaku quieted Sakura and they returned to the group, pretending nothing important had been revealed. Kakashi began a lecture about the shinobi countries, but Sakura quickly grew bored. Kohaku took out her guitar, strummed a few chords, and sang a familiar song to pass the time as the team prepared to depart. Kohaku's POV. Chains wrapped around Kakashi, catching him by surprise. Everyone watched in shock as the chains tightened and Kakashi cried out, appearing badly hurt. Kohaku's eyes widened as memories of past torture rushed back. Flashes of needles and pain filled her mind like a sickening movie. Her breaths came short and fast as fear gripped her chest. She remained frozen until a burning pain flared in her side. Kohaku looked down to see a ninja with clawed weapons pressing into her. He twisted the blades to intensify the pain. She felt warmth on her hand and something fall to the ground. Then she did something she had tried so hard not to do. Kohaku let out a raw, fearful scream. Kimi's POV. Kimi and the team had been moving through the village on a mission to deal with a group of rogues that were becoming a threat to the sand. Kimi worried about her sister Kohaku. Thinking of her made her heart ache. They had been apart for too long, but Kimi tried to tell herself it was for the best. Kimi smoothed a hand through Gaara's soft red hair, teasing it idly. Temari regarded her with thinly veiled irritation, and Gaara's sand shifted in an awkward way, but Kimi continued, amused by the fluffiness under her fingers. Gaara asked what she was doing, and Kimi answered that she was playing with his hair because it was soft. Kankuro began to speak when a scream cut through the air, an unmistakable cry that Kimi had heard for years. It was Kohaku. Everyone froze. Gaara's expression darkened with the urge to go after the source of that scream, but Kimi stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm to calm him. Kimi said she would check on the scream while the others completed the mission. They hesitated, then let her go after a hard stare from Kimi that made them agree. Gaara instructed her to return before dark with a note of something like worry in his eyes. Kimi promised she would be back, then ran toward the woods, following the direction of the scream. Kimi entered a clearing and saw Kohaku clutching her side, her shirt stained with signs of injury. Kohaku sank to her knees, trying not to move. Kimi called Kohaku's name softly. Kohaku's head whipped toward her, surprise in her eyes, then she suddenly screamed Kimi's name in a burst of relief. Kimi moved forward and wrapped her arms around her sister, holding her tightly. They stayed locked in the embrace until Kimi's hand brushed Kohaku's wound and Kohaku flinched. Kimi asked who had hurt her. Kohaku rasped a single name and pointed to a ninja in a strange outfit. Kimi noticed a dark mark on the ninja's clawed hand and knew he was the one who had struck her sister. Kimi lunged, quickly incapacitating the attacker with focused, skillful strikes. Kakashi placed a hand on Kimi's shoulder and pulled her back, explaining that the team would take it from there. He bound the rogues to a tree and began questioning them. Kimi turned when she heard Kohaku cough. Kohaku clutched her side and then fell backward. Kimi cried out in alarm. Kimi's POV continued. Kimi watched the life drain from Kohaku's face as she collapsed. Kimi had wanted to move to catch her but had been frozen in place. She forced herself to look away until Kohaku hit the ground. When she dared to open her eyes, a blonde-haired ninja Naruto was holding Kohaku in his arms, then gently set her down on the ground. Kimi moved to sit beside her sister. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she examined Kohaku. Kohaku's face was unsteady and very pale, and her lips had an unusual color, as if she were extremely unwell. Kimi formed a hand seal and gathered chakra, the green light coating her palms. She pressed her hands to Kohaku's chest and felt for any sign of life, but there was nothing. Kimi swallowed hard, pressed her forehead against her sister's limp body, and sobbed until she could breathe again. She calmed herself and tried once more to sense any sign of life. She snapped her head up and looked into Naruto's eyes. She asked Naruto if he had felt that. Naruto replied that he had not understood what she meant. She instructed Naruto to place his hand over Kohaku's heart and gestured toward her. Naruto nodded and did as he was told. His eyes widened with hope, and the sight made her heart swell until tears of joy blurred her vision. She vowed quietly that if he ever broke Kohaku's heart, he would face fierce consequences. Naruto confirmed that he could feel it. A teammate from behind asked what they were feeling, and she told him to stay back, ignoring his question. She looked down at Kohaku and gathered chakra into her hands to begin healing. She cursed silently when the fabric of Kohaku's shirt interfered with the flow. She took a kunai and carefully loosened the front of the shirt to allow access. An older man demanded what she was doing from behind, and she explained that she was trying to bring Kohaku back, telling everyone to look away. They all complied, everyone except Naruto, who kept staring at Kohaku and murmuring for her to wake. She pressed her hands to Kohaku's chest again and channeled chakra into healing form. The rhythm she restored sounded like a steady heartbeat. Dee-boom, dee-boom, dee-boom. Suddenly Kohaku's eyes opened and she inhaled sharply as if she had been holding her breath too long. Kohaku awoke to darkness receding and a small light in the background. A woman's voice reached her, distant as though through a tunnel, urging her to live. Kohaku asked who the voice belonged to, but the response had only been to tell her to wake. Light then flooded her vision, and the first thing she saw was blue eyes Naruto's. Her breathing returned. She swallowed oxygen greedily and slowly sat up. Kimi noticed and helped her to her feet. Kimi admonished her not to scare them like that and then pulled her into a fierce hug. When Kimi let go, Kohaku realized her shirt was partly open in the front. Before she could cover herself, Naruto moved quickly and zipped his jacket up, his cheeks flushed. Kohaku felt warmth from the gesture and slipped her arms through the sleeves of her jacket, also blushing. She savored the comfort before turning to Kimi and asking why the shirt had been opened. Kimi explained that the fabric had blocked the chakra and had to be moved. The two women held back tears, embraced again, and cried together, bringing Naruto awkwardly into their circle of support despite his discomfort. Naruto commented with a teasing tone that she had not died, and Kohaku responded with a closed-eyed smile, telling him to be quiet and expressing how glad she was to be alive. Naruto protested the nickname she used for him, and Kimi calmly retorted that he looked the part. Kohaku laughed and high-fived Kimi. Sakura jumped around happily, celebrating that Kohaku had survived. Kakashi wiped his forehead and thanked the gods softly. Even the old beer vendor showed relief. Kimi then pointed out that Naruto needed to address the poison in his hand and indicated a cut. She warned that if he did not drain the poison, he could end up in the same condition Kohaku had been a few minutes earlier. The color drained from everyone's faces at the reminder. Kohaku swore under her breath. While Naruto had frozen, he must have been scratched by those poison claws. She imagined making them pay in some fierce, decisive way, and the thought made everyone instinctively step back. Kohaku blinked innocently and asked what was wrong. Sakura shuddered and said there was nothing to worry about. Kohaku glared at the two ninjas until they squirmed under the intense stare that belonged to either her or Kimi. She reminded herself never to be under that gaze. Kakashi observed that the original C-ranked mission had escalated to a B-ranked operation and that it was beyond their intended scope. Sakura urged that they were not prepared for this and that they should turn back so Naruto could receive treatment for his wound. Kakashi agreed quietly that this might be too dangerous. Kohaku turned and saw Naruto's outraged expression and worried about what he might do. Kakashi suggested they return to heal Naruto, and Kohaku watched in helpless disbelief as Naruto took out a kunai and stabbed his own hand. A flash of pain crossed his face before determination took over. Naruto insisted that he would not run, that he needed to become stronger and had even practiced jutsu on his own. Sakura began to question him but was cut off as Kimi's hand moved in front of her. Naruto declared that he would never be saved again, that he would not lose to Sasuke, and that he would protect the old man and all his friends using the pain as proof of his resolve. He insisted they continue the mission. Kakashi pointed out that if the wound was not wrapped, Naruto could suffer from blood loss. Naruto panicked at the thought of dying young. Kohaku laughed to lighten the mood, went over to Naruto, and took his head in a steadying hold. Kohaku told him to calm down. He relaxed and stared at her. She blushed and looked down as she prepared a cleaning agent. She dressed the wound carefully and felt her face heat as Naruto watched her. She started to wrap his hand and noticed that the cut was already beginning to heal. Kimi telepathically told Kohaku that Naruto was incredibly strong. Kohaku mentally protested that he was not her boyfriend. Kimi teased her and then a small trickle of sand moved around Kimi's foot, visible only to Kimi and Kohaku. Kimi said that her boyfriend was calling, then told Kohaku she would leave and to take it easy, meaning no fighting until she had healed. Kimi disappeared. Sasuke asked who that had been. Kohaku said she would explain when the time was right and finished wrapping Naruto's hand, announcing that the dressing was complete. Naruto examined the wrapping and complimented Kohaku. She smiled a little at the praise. Sasuke muttered that Kohaku should not let her ego grow too much, and Kohaku glared at him. Sakura called for everyone to move on, and the team continued. They were on a boat heading to the land of waves, wrapped against a chill and a heavy fog that made Kohaku shiver. She wished Kimi were still around to clear the fog and warn if something followed them. Sakura, feigning fear, scooted closer to Sasuke, who remained leaning against the side of the boat. Kohaku leaned casually against Naruto and noticed him shift to get more comfortable, ending up closer to her. She blushed as Sakura smirked. The boatman announced they should see the bridge soon, and they approached a massive structure that impressed everyone. Naruto exclaimed at the size, and Kohaku teased him by suggesting he had stolen her reaction. The boatman shot back that he did not have the motor on, and Kohaku made a joke about bad gas. Everyone snickered, even Sasuke smirked and snorted slightly. The boatman flushed but ignored them. Naruto praised Kohaku's comment and she felt a warm flutter at his approval. Kohaku shrugged off the boatman's reaction and settled against Naruto until she began to feel drowsy. She nuzzled into the fabric of Naruto's jacket and fell asleep. Kohaku opened her eyes to find herself in a stone hallway, aware that she was still dreaming. A single candle burned beside her, its small flame throwing shadows along the corridor. She walked down the hallway, calling out when she saw a figure move in the darkness. No one answered, so she continued. A distant voice, soft and amused, addressed her as darling, but Kohaku could not locate its source. The voice felt like a shadow, intangible and separate from any chakra she could sense. When Kohaku asked who the voice belonged to, it laughed and suggested she had asked the wrong question. The voice said the answer would reveal itself in time. Kakashi's voice seemed to echo nearby, remarking that Kohaku was missing an epic battle. The hallway shifted into a swirl of colors, and Kohaku let her eyes refocus. When she opened her eyes fully, she realized someone was carrying her. She screamed and kicked wildly, calling out nonsense, and made a commotion until Sasuke told her to be quiet. I opened my eyes again and blinked up at him. Kohaku greeted Sasuke casually, then immediately realized what had happened and wrenched free from his grip. Naruto snorted and tried to look innocent while Sakura glared. Kohaku asked what had happened while she had been unconscious. Sakura and Sasuke exchanged embarrassed looks as Naruto explained that they, together with Kakashi and Zabuza, had defeated a demon swordsman. Kohaku grumbled that they should have woken her. Sakura replied that they had tried, and that Kohaku had not woken even when Kakashi and Zabuza had created a gigantic flood. Kohaku wondered aloud where Kakashi was. The others looked sheepish and she realized they were carrying him. She reached forward, took his arms, and lifted his upper body with ease. Sasuke called Kohaku's name and she answered. Sasuke pointed out that Naruto's jacket had come undone. Kohaku blushed, and Naruto stepped forward to zip the jacket closed. They finally reached the old man's house and his daughter began treating Kakashi. Kohaku changed into a fresh shirt. When she returned the jacket, their hands brushed and both she and Naruto flushed. Kohaku told Sakura that Tsunami seemed to have taken a liking to Kakashi. Sakura agreed, and they both watched Tsunami fuss over him. Naruto appeared in the doorway with an exaggerated frightened expression and warned them about scary faces. Kohaku shrugged and offered a creepy smile. Naruto shivered and Kohaku laughed. Kakashi called them over. Naruto asked if everything was all right as they approached, and Tsunami nodded before stepping out of the room. Kakashi considered their sleeping arrangements and decided that Sakura and Kohaku would share a room and Naruto and Sasuke would share another. Kohaku told Sakura to stay on her side of their room. Sakura pretended to be offended but was clearly amused. The two began a playful scuffle, hands clashing as they pushed against each other. Kakashi intervened and held them back by their collars while they continued to slap each other's hands away in a miniature contest. Suddenly someone pulled Kohaku back, and she scrambled behind Naruto to get her bearings. Kakashi revised the plan. Naruto and Kohaku would share a room while Sasuke and Sakura would share the other. Kohaku leaped up with joy, hugged Kakashi, and ran circles around the room. Sasuke stared in astonishment. Something fell from Kohaku's pocket and Kakashi picked it up. Kohaku identified the item as pixie sticks and excitedly ran around the room. When Kakashi asked how many she had eaten, Kohaku confessed that it was probably 100. Kakashi sighed. From outside came a familiar voice calling her name, and Kakashi suggested that Tsunami might have spiked the candy with caffeine. Naruto asked what would happen if Kohaku got caffeine, and Kakashi warned that she would go into an intense sugar rush and become almost impossible to calm. Kohaku, already bouncing, asked rhetorically what made anyone think she was ever calm and then laughed and continued to dart around the room. At one point she declared that straw pigs were evil, ran into a wall, and fell over. She claimed she was a unicorn and playfully begged an apple not to harm her. The others exchanged resigned looks and muttered that it was just another day with Kohaku. I ran around the room with boundless energy while the rest of the household tried to keep up with my frantic movements. The others called me naughty for my sugar-fueled antics, and I laughed as I dashed past them. Sakura remarked that watching me was already tiring. Naruto rose and said he might have an idea. Kakashi warned him to be careful, worrying that something could go wrong if I misinterpreted things. Naruto assured them he would be fine and approached me slowly. I stopped and tilted my head at him, then Kakashi and Sasuke exclaimed at how adorable I looked, which made me flinch and glance toward the window. Naruto spoke softly to tell me it was okay and moved to guide me away from the glass. A child hurried past in a rush, eyes red with silent tears, and an image of a younger me appeared unbidden, my sister comforting me as we watched our village collapse and burn. The memory drained the energy from my body and left me stunned. When I came back to myself, Naruto was holding me steady. Sakura asked if I knew what had happened, but I shook my head and let her explain the cause of my sugar rush. Her words, however, triggered flashes that filled my mind with cries and chaos from that night. When I finally rejoined the group, everyone was staring. I tried to joke about being attractive to break the tension, striking a pose and claiming people noticed me when I walked in. Kakashi began to speak, Then I cut him off and added a joking, exaggerated comment about my presence overwhelming others. Kakashi shook his head, and the others continued to look at me with surprise. Naruto started to mention Kakashi, but Sasuke interjected. Sakura interrupted as well. I shrugged and teased, calling Kakashi father in a playful way. Kakashi denied it, and the others watched me as I left the room. Outside, I bumped into Inari, Tsunami's child, and we stared at one another briefly before someone shouted that Zabuza was alive. I raised an eyebrow and then disappeared with a hand sign, leaving the others startled behind Kakashi. Back inside, I asked who Zabuza was. Sasuke explained that Zabuza was a man they had thought killed. I asked how he had been killed, and Naruto described the scene. A stranger had arrived, attacked Zabuza with needles, Kakashi had pronounced him dead, and then the assailant had taken Zabuza with them. Kakashi identified the attacker as a hunter nin. I considered the information and pointed out that hunter nin are supposed to deal with their victims on site to prevent secrets from spreading. That suggested a possibility that Zabuza might still be alive. The group exchanged looks and agreed they needed to prepare, which meant training. Sakura and I perched on a branch and laughed as the others struggled to climb a tree without using their hands, channeling chakra to their feet to move upward. Kakashi called Sakura down to protect a client at a nearby bridge, and she obeyed. Kakashi settled down with a book to read. I checked the sky and guessed it was about 5 in the afternoon. I jumped gracefully from the branch and started toward the house when Naruto caught my hand. A warm flush ran through me at the touch. Naruto asked if I could teach him how to climb the tree. He asked it nervously and awkwardly. His eagerness made me smile. I explained that he had to relax, clear his mind, and focus chakra into his feet to climb. He thanked me and, before I could answer, wrapped his arms around me briefly in thanks and dashed off to practice on the tree beside him. I felt giddy as I headed back to the house. Once inside, I went to the adjoining bathroom to shower and loosen up. The hot water helped relax my muscles. After drying off and reaching for a towel, I stepped out and froze when I realized Naruto was standing nearby, having inadvertently seen more than intended. He immediately apologized and turned away, embarrassed. I wrapped the towel securely and changed into fresh clothes, both of us awkward and flushed, then reassured him that it was fine. I took a moment to steady myself before continuing with the evening. Kohaku woke to Naruto saying he had come up to gather her for dinner, and he reached for her hand to pull her downstairs. She thrashed in bed as the memory of the nightmare returned. Fire, death, betrayal. In the dream her uncle lunged with a kunai, his face hard with anger, and the blade struck toward her chest before she jolted awake with a scream. Naruto sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and saw she was shaking. Naruto asked what was wrong, and when she could not answer he moved closer to offer comfort. Kohaku explained through sobs that her uncle had killed their clan and had tried to kill her. The emotion choked her voice, and Naruto held her protectively, promising that no one would harm her while he was there. Gradually she calmed, and they settled until she was able to sleep again. That night she finally slept peacefully. Kohaku woke the next morning beside Naruto and smiled at the quiet warmth of the room. Naruto asked how she had slept, and she told him she slept well thanks to him. He returned her smile with a gentle, reassuring gesture that made both of them blush. Their moment was broken when Kakashi strode in, exclaiming that they were too young. Kohaku protested to her father that it was not what it looked like, and both she and Naruto instinctively stepped apart. Kakashi softened at the sight of them together for a second, but then resumed scolding them for being too young. Kohaku laughed and danced away from his reach, and when Kakashi moved after her she ran downstairs to the kitchen, weaving between the table to keep distance between him and herself. Kakashi continued to shout that they were too young, and Kohaku laughed before dashing outside in quick clothes. She climbed a tree, prompting Kakashi to follow, and then used a small burst of air to float down in a quick, playful maneuver across the yard and back toward her room. When she returned through the window, Naruto blushed but smiled and asked what had happened. Kohaku said she did not know, then asked him to turn around briefly so she could change in private. He obliged. She changed into her usual clothes quickly and handed him her headband, asking if he would tie it for her. Naruto tied her hair carefully. Their faces came close and both felt a confused flutter of emotion, but a loud crash downstairs jolted them apart. Kohaku took Naruto's hand and urged him that they would be late if they did not hurry. He nodded and followed as she pulled them toward the stairs, her thoughts spinning at the possibility that she might be falling for him and how far that feeling would go. They walked into the kitchen together. Everyone watched, and Kakashi sat with his arms folded, grumbling as he poked his eggs. Kohaku teased him about being grumpy and called him a fatherly figure, which made the others smirk. Sasuke asked what had happened, and Kohaku joked in a mock-serious tone that she had told Kakashi she was having a baby. The room froze for a beat, then erupted. Sasuke choked on his food, Sakura went pale, and Kakashi freaked out until Kohaku and Naruto broke into laughter and revealed it was a prank. The group relaxed, and Kakashi, relieved, pretended to scold her before pulling her into a relieved embrace. Later, Kohaku hefted a log by herself, carried it to the end of the bridge, and set it down. Once it was in place, Naruto came over to secure it. It was my turn to supervise the bridge construction, and a few of the crew had quit, so we were filling in. One of the workers called for a lunch break, and we all dropped our tools to get our lunch boxes. Naruto walked up and kept pace beside me, our hands brushed every few steps. I blushed and smirked but did not move away. We sat down and I opened my lunch, my stomach grumbled. I decided to get a drink and told the group I was going for one. Naruto watched me as I walked around the corner. At the fountain, when I leaned down, someone behind me whistled. I turned and saw a tall man with black hair and brown eyes. He identified me as the girl who had lifted all that wood and stepped closer. He made an unwelcome suggestion, and I stiffened, ready to defend myself. Naruto immediately wrapped an arm around my waist and pulled me close. Naruto demanded what was going on, and the man replied that they had only been talking before backing away. I ran to the nearest trash can and vomited. Naruto came over, held my hair back, and rubbed small circles on my back until I felt better. I gave Naruto a shaky smile. Naruto apologized for the situation, and we finished the shift together. We walked back into the house and I sighed. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Sakura reached for me and pulled me into her room. Sakura explained that they were going to a party and quickly produced a blue dress with black silk on the bodice. Sakura urged me to change, set me into black flats, and swept my hair to the side in a tangle of blonde curls. She added a light touch of makeup to my eyes and lips and pushed me out the door. Outside, Naruto was dressed in black pants, a white shirt, and a dark jacket. He looked over me appreciatively from head to toe. Sakura explained that the adults had gone to the bar and they had decided to go to a nearby party. Duckbutt spoke in his monotone and Sakura nodded eagerly. Naruto reached out and offered his arm. I threaded my arm through his. Naruto told me I looked beautiful, and I replied that he looked handsome. He smiled, and we walked to the party in a comfortable silence. Along the way, Naruto and I compared who could spot the most ramen shops. When I grew bored, I had him carry me for part of the walk. He stopped and jumped up quickly, making me slide farther up his back, and I sighed into his shoulder, feeling the steady strength beneath him. At the party, Sakura straightened my dress and I could still feel where Naruto's hands had briefly rested on my legs. Sakura encouraged everyone to relax and have fun. Naruto sensed my uneasiness and threw an arm over my shoulder in a friendly squeeze. We went inside where loud music was playing. I pulled Naruto to the center of the dance floor and started to dance to the beat. He matched my movements, and soon we were dancing close as the crowd pressed around us. By the time the song ended, we were grinning and out of breath. Naruto told me he would be back and went to get drinks. I walked to the counter and grabbed 2 sodas from the ice bucket. When I turned, I saw Naruto surrounded by other people, laughing and having a good time. My chest tightened, but I composed myself and set my face into a neutral expression. I moved toward the door, but loud voices announced that a party game was about to start. The hosts explained it would pair people at random for a light-hearted activity. Their attention landed on me, and someone handed me a hat and asked me to pick. Kohaku flinched and fished a piece of paper from the hat, then called out that the number was 13. They nodded and pushed her into the closet. She went to a corner and sat down. The closet opened again and someone was shoved inside. Kohaku recognized the person immediately. She called Naruto's name and he told her it was him, then settled closer to her. Kohaku apologized for making him stay there with her. Naruto replied that he had only wanted to be there with her. When she voiced her insecurity about the other girls, Naruto gently reassured her and said that she was the only one on his mind. They shared a shy, tender kiss and then held hands. Sakura and Sasuke appeared in the doorway, watching with smug expressions. After a moment they walked away, carrying themselves proudly. Naruto offered his hand and Kohaku took it, and together they left the room, brushing off whistles and catcalls as Naruto led them outside. Standing under the moonlight, Naruto confessed that he loved her and asked if she would go out with him. Kohaku smiled, a smile she only reserved for him and Kimi, and accepted. Naruto returned her smile and gave her a gentle kiss before they walked away together. The morning after they became a couple, they stopped for ramen and hurried back toward the house, arriving before Kakashi and the others. Sakura and Sasuke were left to pull weeds for the rest of the night. Kohaku fell asleep in Naruto's arms and the last thing she remembered was being held. She curled into the warm spot he had left, feeling Naruto chuckle. He smiled down at her and kissed her nose. She complained that she was cold, and Naruto urged her to get up. When she tried to adjust his headband, she accidentally caught his hair. She eased his hands and fixed the band for him. They touched foreheads, and Kohaku asked him what was wrong. Naruto took a breath and explained that the others had left without them to confront Zabuza. Kohaku grabbed her bag and dressed in a few quick motions. She pulled on her headband and gloves and told Naruto they needed to go help. He grinned and the two of them raced out the door. They passed the little boy Kohaku nicknamed Yellow and his mother, whom she called Red, and exchanged quick goodbyes. They moved through the trees, leaping between branches. When they reached a clearing, the sight of sword marks on the trees and a fallen wild boar made Naruto say that this had just happened. They followed the signs back toward the house and realized that Yellow and Red might be in danger. They dashed back. At the house, two armed men were running toward the boy with their swords raised. Red was bound nearby and crying for help. Naruto created a shadow clone that slipped past to free the mother. The real Naruto and Kohaku appeared beside the attackers and tripped them, making Yellow laugh. One of the men swore in surprise while Naruto taunted them. The other man made an inappropriate comment toward the child, which prompted Kohaku to react. She moved swiftly and delivered a decisive strike that sent him reeling and crashing through a portion of the deck in a dramatic, non-graphic way. The action was fast and decisive, and it earned her new respect from the onlookers. Naruto handled the other attacker, swiftly tying both of them up. He returned to Kohaku with a warm smile and put an arm around her shoulder. The little boy tried to thank them both, his voice trembling with relief, and then called out loudly that he knew what Naruto was going to say. He protested that he was a big baby for crying, his anger showing. Naruto told him that sometimes it was okay to cry when you were happy, tears sliding down his cheeks. Yellow looked up and cried with Naruto, "Happy tears?" My own tears slid silently. Naruto, no matter what, cared for people, and in return they cared for him. After the short crying episode ended, they retrieved their fallen supplies and continued on their way. Yellow asked if Naruto really had to go. The narrator observed that heroes often arrived late but still showed up when needed. Naruto moved up behind the narrator, smiling, and wrapped an arm around them. He teased that the narrator was a philosopher, and the narrator joked that he was a female Hulk, flexing with a grin. Naruto laughed and affirmed it, then reached out and took the narrator's hand as they heard the sounds of battle nearby. He held out his pinky finger and the narrator hooked theirs through his. They made a promise not to kiss in the middle of battle, sealing it with a small, sincere gesture, and then they rushed together toward where their comrades needed help. He explained that the gesture was meant to seal the promise. Before long they arrived at the bridge. Kohaku burst into the scene distraught at the number of enemies. Naruto had appeared at the front of the fight as the obvious protector and Kohaku had waited a few minutes before joining. The chaos made her angry and bewildered. Insults and wild language escaped her in the heat of the moment. Zabuza, carrying an enormous sword, challenged them, and Kohaku was struck by the absurdity of how anyone could wield such a blade. Kakashi observed that Kohaku and Kimi were alike, remarking that they could pass for sisters. Kohaku mocked the comparison and then prepared for action. Zabuza commanded them to fight, and mist began to form around them, the waves from the water striking the bridge. Sakura and Kohaku drew their kunai and took positions to protect the bridge builder. Kakashi pulled his mask up to reveal his Sharingan and ordered them to keep watch and not let the bridge builder out of sight. Kohaku, Sakura, and Kakashi braced themselves as an unexpected opponent, the Cow Man, appeared between them. Sakura struck him with inhuman strength, sending him into the air before he crashed down. Kohaku formed seals and unleashed an Earth-style dust explosion. The compacted dust mixed with the water clone's form and disrupted the Cowman's technique, turning the water into mud. Kohaku laughed and used the mud to form a mud clone of herself. Zabuza sneered that Kohaku had appropriated his jutsu, but she shrugged it off and settled into a corner, watching the fog and chaos. Kakashi used his dogs to track Zabuza, who reappeared and continued to hold off their attempts to help Naruto and Sasuke. Kohaku, jittery with leftover energy, was shaken back to focus by the battle sounds. Then she saw a giant mirror dome encasing Naruto and Sasuke and recognized the Hunter Nin. Sakura confirmed that it was a mirror dome. Zabuza re-emerged and stood between them and their teammates, preventing reinforcements. Kohaku fought to stay composed, but then she witnessed a moment that froze her. The Hunter Nin unleashed a barrage of deadly needles toward Naruto. Sasuke moved to intercept and was struck in the back as he defended Naruto, then he collapsed, appearing unresponsive. Kohaku felt a sharp intake of breath and a single silent tear as memories of a past night overlapped with this scene. The sight of Sasuke going down filled everyone with a sudden, raw panic. Naruto's anger released the Nine-Tails power, and Kohaku could only stare at how intense he looked. Kakashi observed that the situation was not good. Sakura expressed confusion. Kohaku bent and grabbed her head as a rush of unfamiliar words and phrases filled her mind. One thing was certain, the voice in her head wanted her to go to Naruto and connect with his chakra. She suddenly blurted that she wanted to give him Nutella, and everyone looked at her oddly while her attention remained fixed on Naruto. Kakashi warned Kohaku that she could not go and held her shoulder to stop her from advancing. Kohaku insisted that she needed to, struggling to get away. Zabuza told Kakashi to let her go so the fight could begin, drew his sword, and took a ready stance. When Kakashi's hold slackened, Kohaku escaped and jumped over the line as Kakashi and Zabuza charged each other. By the time she reached Naruto, he had already broken out of the Hunter Nin's mirror barrier. Kohaku leaped onto Naruto's back. He did not look back but reached a hand behind him. She grabbed it and he flung her onto his back. She wrapped her arms around his neck and felt the dark chakra envelop her. Her own dark chakra poured out to mingle with his, easing her pain, and it shifted into an air-like form so Naruto would not be burdened, though everyone could still see her presence. The masked ninja demanded to know what was going on. Naruto growled, and Kohaku felt a sudden pain in her eye. Embarrassed by having taken Kimi's snack, Kohaku apologized loudly before losing consciousness. After some time, the pain in her eye subsided and she fell asleep on Naruto. She woke when her back struck the cold stone of the bridge. Naruto shook her shoulder and called her name gently. Kohaku opened her eyes to his bright blue gaze and blushed when he focused on her left eye. Naruto told her that her eye looked different and reached out to touch the area around it with care. Kohaku asked if it was bad. Naruto reassured her that it was beautiful, that the color was golden with orange swirls lining the pupil, and that it matched her other eye perfectly. He helped her to her feet and gently grazed her cheek in a comforting, friendly way. Cheering came from the direction of the battle. The Hunter Nin had been defeated and the immediate threat had been neutralized. The influential businessman the villagers had feared had also been taken down. Kohaku sighed with relief to see everyone all right. Naruto nodded and led her over to Sasuke. Auto-san and Sakura were already there. Sakura rushed to Sasuke and fussed over him with relieved enthusiasm. Kakashi began to point out Kohaku's eye, but Kohaku interrupted and asked if the man they had fought with was really gone. Sakura and Naruto confirmed that he was, though Kohaku still had doubts. She poked Sasuke repeatedly in a nervous attempt to make sure he was all right, and the others watched in amusement. Trying to lighten the mood, Kohaku announced that it was time to celebrate. At first everyone looked surprised, then they relaxed. Naruto slipped an arm around Kohaku's waist in a friendly gesture and smiled cheerfully. Kakashi agreed that it would be good to relax for a bit, and Sakura joked about the attention they might receive. The group linked arms as they prepared to head back together. They ran towards Sasuke, and Sakura greeted him with a big, excited embrace. Kohaku felt the change in her hair fall away from her face and tried to cover her eye again, flustered by the attention. Sasuke noted that he was not the only one whose eye had changed and said that it seemed like a good change. He offered a friendly gesture of camaraderie. Before the moment could become awkward, Naruto stepped in and pulled Kohaku closer by the waist, bringing their faces near enough that she teased lightly about his chin. As they made their way back across the bridge toward Red's house, Naruto kept Kohaku on his back, insisting she keep her feet off the ground. Kohaku told the group that she had actually known Sasuke for a long time, explaining that they had all known one another since they were very young. The others asked how that could be, and they continued home together, ready to rest and recover from the day's events. Naruto insisted that he would have remembered, squeezing her legs and lifting her higher onto his back. She asked the others if they remembered a bright orange-haired girl. When they shook their heads, she felt a sudden pang of disappointment and reached out to Kakashi. He began to protest, but she held her hand out until he sighed, opened his wallet, and produced a photograph. Kakashi handed it to her, and she held the picture up in front of Naruto. Naruto immediately recognized her as Curly Top and called out the nickname. She giggled and nodded, pressing her cheek to his neck. Naruto remarked that it made sense she had seemed familiar back in the academy. The photograph showed Kimi and her. Kimi looked the same, and the picture captured the narrator with bright, unrestrained orange hair. Sasuke asked skeptically how her hair had changed from orange to blonde. She explained that her father had orange hair but her mother's blonde genes proved dominant, so it eventually changed. Naruto snickered and teased that Sasuke was not as smart as they thought, praising her as Kohaku-chan. Sasuke bristled and snapped for him to be quiet, scowling with a proud air. Naruto rolled his sleeves and moved towards Sasuke in a show of bravado. Sakura lunged at Naruto, but the narrator was quicker and caught her fist. She leaned against Naruto's back protectively and asked Sakura not to hurt him. Naruto chuckled at Sasuke's jealous expression and reached up to hold the narrator's hand while still keeping her secure on his back. She cheered about the piggyback ride, and the other three laughed with her as their tension eased and the threat seemed to pass. Kohaku's point of view. They finished the bridge not long after they defeated Zabuza. They all cried when it was named the Great Naruto Bridge, then made the long, weary journey home. Once they arrived, both Kohaku and Naruto slept hard. The alarm went off early. Kohaku groaned as Naruto's clock rang and stared at the wall before a loud thud made her sit up. She called for Naruto and found him face down on the floor, one hand stretched toward the alarm. When he did not answer, she leaned over and rolled him so she could see his face. She pressed her ear to his chest and felt relief when she realized he was breathing. Naruto surprised her by teasing her playfully about being affectionate, then turned her toward him with a grin. Kohaku reacted with an admonishing tap on his head that left a small bump, and Naruto waved his hands to show he understood. Kohaku smiled and stood to go to the kitchen. She invited Naruto to join her for breakfast and he rose slowly to follow. Kohaku asked if his head still hurt and offered to help. He wrapped his arms around her waist and suggested gently that if anything else hurt he would take care of it. They shared a brief, affectionate moment before the front door opened and Kimi burst in, brimming with energy. Kimi announced that she had known they would make an adorable couple and warned Naruto to treat Kohaku well. Naruto stepped back so Kohaku could hug her sister, and Kimi lifted Kohaku's bangs to look at her eyes. Kimi revealed that rumors were going around about Kohaku's connection, and then flipped her own bangs to show a red streak, smiling with satisfaction. Kohaku guessed that the red streak indicated Gaara. Kimi confirmed and then examined Naruto's wrist before congratulating him. Naruto asked what was happening. Kimi explained that their clan's Kekkei Genkai not only influenced elements but also helped guide Jinchuriki with their powers once their spirit matured. She added that their spirits matured around age 12. Because Kohaku had bonded with Naruto's chakra, that bond meant only Naruto could directly connect with her, and she could only meld with his chakra. Kimi clarified that this bond made the relationship unique and exclusive in that particular way. Naruto tightened his hold on Kohaku and said he would not let anyone else take that bond. Kimi laughed and invited them to breakfast, and the three of them went to make pancakes together. Later, at the training fields, Kimi put Kohaku through a strict routine while sipping lemonade. Kimi explained that Kohaku needed physical strength to influence Earth and reminded her that the Chunin exams were only 2 days away. Kohaku protested about the workload and rushed off to find Naruto, admitting she did not know exactly where he was. Kimi scolded her for panicking and, after a brief tease about giving her extra caffeinated snacks as a joke, told her to focus on sensing Naruto's chakra. Kohaku closed her eyes, centered herself, and found Naruto's presence. Elated, she ran toward him while Kimi called after her to slow down. Kimi kept a tether on Kohaku until they reached a tree, then let her go. Kohaku spotted Naruto talking with some others. Nearby were Naruto's rival and his group, and Sasuke sat in a tree preparing to throw a rock. Kohaku's mood darkened. She moved up behind Sasuke and warned him that if he struck Naruto there would be serious consequences. She then shoved him off the branch so he landed on the ground, more shaken than hurt. I snickered before I jumped down and landed in Naruto's arms. Sakura ran towards Sasuke and shouted angrily at Kohaku, but she was interrupted when Kimi landed on Sasuke with surprising force, pinning him lower to the ground. Naruto snickered and I felt warm inside as I hugged him tightly. Gaara, Kitty, and T stared at me in disbelief when I turned and introduced myself as Kohaku. Naruto teased that I should not overuse the name, and his arms tightened around my waist. I patted his arm to reassure him. Kimi replied coolly that she and the others had been talking, reclining bridal style in Gaara's arms. Naruto said they were discussing the Chunin exams, and I told him I had wanted to tell him something about it earlier but yawned against his chest and admitted I did not want to go. Naruto confirmed the Chunin exams were coming and the others agreed. Later, after we left Panda with Kimi, Kankuro, and Tamaki, Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and I met with my father. He completed our mission and handed us a paper with information about the Chunin exams. Everyone was excited. Sakura had been especially enthusiastic. I sat on Naruto's bed and helped him fill out his form. I pointed to the line where he needed to sign and told him to sign his name. He placed the pen in the wrong spot twice, which made both of us laugh until I fell backward onto the bed. I teased him that he was hopeless and he feigned being hurt, falling backwards beside me. He smiled and reached up to graze my cheek with his fingertips, saying that he was not entirely hopeless because he had me. I joked about him running into walls without me and he laughed. Naruto asked if I was ticklish, grinning mischievously. I denied it loudly and ran to the kitchen, and he chased after me while pretending to whistle innocently. He tried to keep his composure, but then he called out a shadow clone jutsu and 5 Narutos appeared. 2 of his clones held my arms apart while the others secured my legs. Another clone approached with a teasing expression. Despite my protests, the clones began to tickle me, and soon my laughter filled the house. Tears sprang to my eyes from laughing so hard, and I continued to squirm and shake my head in mirth. The door slammed open and Kimi barged in. She grabbed the collars of Naruto and me and dragged us outside. She announced that because I was now imprinted with the clan, she had something to give me and intended to train both of us. Naruto took my hand and asked where we would train. Kimi said the clan housing of the Munrado. I took a deep breath and stared at Naruto. He put a hand on my back and asked if I would be okay. When I did not answer, he pulled me toward him and wrapped an arm around my shoulder, promising to stay by my side. I thanked him and tried to steady my nerves. Kimi led the way and Naruto squeezed my shoulders. We braced ourselves and set off. As we walked toward the old Munrado compound, Naruto squeezed my hand every few steps to steady me. I worried aloud that the place might not be the same or that it had been damaged, and Naruto tried to soothe me. He offered a firm promise that things would be all right, and he gave a determined thumbs up. I laughed and tried to let his confidence lift my spirits. He walked with his hands behind his head as we caught up to Kimi. I looked down at my gloves and fidgeted until someone bumped their hip into mine, throwing me off balance. Naruto tried to hide a smile behind a whistle, but when I walked back beside him with a stony expression, he began to worry and asked if I was okay. When I remained silent, he looked away, clearly searching for the reason behind my mood. A tense pause followed as the group continued toward the clan house. She bumped him playfully and he stumbled off the path. She tried to stifle a laugh, but Naruto noticed quickly. He pouted that it was unfair and admitted he had been worried she hated him. She smiled and hugged him, asking why she would hate him over something like that. He shrugged and wrapped an arm around her waist and held her tightly, confessing that years of people hating him had made him assume others felt the same. Tears sprang to her eyes and she wrapped her arms around him until they ached. She assured him she could never hate him and nestled into his shoulder. Something brushed through her hair and Naruto smiled. She buried her nose into his jacket. Naruto began to speak, but his words were muffled by her hair. They looked at each other and felt a sudden, electric closeness. Their breathing quickened and they stood very close. She broke the tension with a playful joke that made them both laugh. He pretended to be offended, then laughed, and she bounced up so their faces nearly met for a split second before she stepped back. Naruto moved with ninja speed and gently guided her cheek back toward his face, and they both burst into laughter. She took his hand, laced their fingers together, and led him over to where Kimi waited. Kimi stood with her arms crossed, her tail twitching in annoyance as she flicked her hair back. Sasuke leaned over the balcony of his house, asking why they were all at his place. Naruto squeezed her hand and threw an arm over her shoulder, fingers still intertwined. Kimi grew impatient and used her searching gaze to freeze Sasuke from the neck down. Naruto tried to hold back laughter but failed as Sasuke tipped over the deck railing and landed in the mud. She tapped him on the head in exasperation and he sank to his knees, burying his face against her waist. Naruto protested with mock tears. She patted his head and allowed him to hug her waist tighter. When Naruto thanked her, she used a hand sign and caused a dirt giant to form and sit on Sasuke's frozen body. Naruto came up behind her and pulled her away. Kimi then led them to a wall behind Sasuke's house, a wall that bore the 4 Hokages and an entire forest engraved into it. The leaves were crafted from gems and precious metals. Kimi explained that only the Naruto clan could see their training area and that because Kohaku had imprinted Naruto, he had been welcomed into the family, a rare honor. Naruto gently ran his finger over the gems, asking if they were real diamonds, and she confirmed that they were. She touched a turquoise heart-shaped stone and remembered her grandfather placing it into the wall. Naruto's hand grazed hers and she gratefully took it. Kimi placed her hand on a leaf-shaped emerald handle and pulled. The wall opened to reveal the Naruto training area. They both marveled at its beauty. The Naruto training area was indeed beautiful. At the far end of the wall shone the clan symbol, a crescent moon wrapped around a star, the moon carved from white marble and the star from obsidian. The area was divided into 4 spaces for fire, earth, wind, and water, each decorated with ribbons and gems in the matching elemental colors. Each section had subdivisions for ice and lightning and similar disciplines. In the center stood a black and white building whose contrasting colors complemented each other. She laughed inwardly at how cool it all was and breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the crisp scent of newly wet leaves and the northern wind. Birds chirped and leaves rustled around them. Kimi called for them to hurry, and she looked up to find Naruto staring. She blushed and looked down. He laughed softly and his hand clasped hers. They decided to move before Kimi returned and walked toward the air section where Kimi was stationed. Kimi teased them about being lovebirds, unable to contain her amusement, and they both reacted with an embarrassed gesture before entering the gazebo-like dojo. The pavilion was decorated in gold, red, and white, and a small wind chime made of trinkets tinkled to the side. She took the stance her grandfather had taught her and prepared to train. Grandfather guided Kohaku through the steps, instructing her to put her right foot forward, left foot back, keep both arms relaxed, inhale and exhale, and then to dance like the wind. Kohaku closed her eyes and followed his directions, letting herself move with the breeze. Naruto had no words for what he had just seen. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever witnessed. She grew visibly relaxed, placed her left foot in front of the right, and began to dance. Her pale hair flipped and curled in time with her movements, and her white shirt reflected the red and gold fabrics around them. Small beads of sweat trailed down her forehead and cheeks, but she hardly noticed. A breeze gradually picked up and made the nearby wind chime tinkle. Kimi told Naruto that he was lucky and motioned for him to sit. He obeyed but did not take his eyes off Kohaku. When Naruto asked why, Kimi explained that Kohaku almost never showed this dance to anyone. This was only the second time Kimi had seen it, and the first had been by accident. Kimi added that this time it seemed Kohaku wanted Naruto to see. Naruto felt something warm and gentle grow inside him as he watched. Kimi murmured that Kohaku did not like to admit it, but she truly could seem to walk on air. Naruto asked what she meant, and Kimi waved it off, saying it was nothing. Kohaku reached the climax of her dance as the breeze strengthened and she appeared to lift off the ground. She then came to a slow stop and bowed before Naruto. Time seemed to pause as Kohaku's blue and amber eyes met Naruto's, and the only sound was the wind chime. Naruto smiled. Kohaku blushed and looked down. Kohaku scolded herself inwardly and lowered into a bow in front of Naruto as Kimi had instructed. Kimi then told them both to look into each other's eyes. Kohaku obeyed and felt her face heat again at the expression in Naruto's eyes. Kimi explained that the first thing every imprinted couple learned was telepathy, a way to communicate without words. Kimi said that this time Kohaku and Naruto could look through each other's thoughts as a sign of trust and instructed them to open their minds. Naruto reacted with alarm when he suddenly realized he could reach into Kohaku's mind. He shouted his surprise and then gasped as if surfacing from deep water. Kimi hushed him and said she would explain later. Now it was Kohaku's turn to enter Naruto's mind. Naruto, still shaken, nodded. Kohaku reached for his hands and he held them gratefully, his grip unexpectedly tight. Kohaku imagined Naruto's mind as a warm orange sunset and reached mentally into it. When her attempt succeeded, she felt a rush of joy and steadied herself. The scene shifted, and she found herself standing in a long hallway. She heard a younger version of Naruto's voice and ran toward it, sandals slapping on the floor. She followed turns and finally reached a door where the voice came from. Inside, a projected scene showed Naruto playing with classmates before being pulled away by their parents. Kohaku felt anger at the loneliness he had faced and a fierce desire to comfort him. She moved on through brownish hallways until she came into a wide, cavernous room. The floor looked like clear, smooth water, and in the center lay two red barred doors sealed with tags. The room trembled as if something large were sleeping and snoring. An orange eyelid opened briefly, revealing a red and black pupil beneath. Kohaku was about to speak to it when she felt a gentle tug and was returned to the present, sitting on a gold and white pillow in front of Naruto and looking into his eyes. Kohaku silently promised Naruto she would protect him, and without hesitation, flung herself at him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Naruto froze for a moment, then realized they were communicating in their minds. He reacted with delighted surprise and hugged her in return, pressing a gentle, affectionate touch to her forehead. Kohaku blushed and buried her face against his coat. Kimi, pleased, observed that the connection had worked and reminded them that the Chunin exams were the next day, so they should get some rest. Kohaku playfully grabbed a pillow and tossed it at Kimi. Kimi ducked and laughed as she walked away. She thought the laughter would end soon when Kimi discovered that Gaara had been invited over. I stood by the door and watched, amused, as Kimi flushed after Gaara kissed her and lifted her in a bridal carry. I smirked at the quiet satisfaction of payback. Naruto cleared his throat, and I turned to look at him. My eyes widened when I saw him holding a slightly crushed rose and a tub of Nutella. He offered them as a simple Valentine's gift to Kohaku and added that it was not much. I felt my cheeks warm and accepted the presents, suddenly remembering it was Valentine's Day. I began to apologize, but Naruto interrupted and hugged me tightly. He said that I had not forgiven him and that he already had his Valentine's present. He told me that I was the only Valentine's present he wanted and needed. I blushed and allowed Naruto to lift me onto his lap as he led me out to the patio. He sat down with me in his arms, and we watched the sunset together. I remarked that the sunset was beautiful as we looked at the orange sky. Naruto replied that I was even more beautiful. He nuzzled my neck, and I felt the warmth of his smile. Naruto told me he loved me, and I felt happy and returned the sentiment. Kimi's POV. Kimi groaned and rolled to her side, though she struggled because Gaara's arm was draped across her waist. She stared at it and felt her cheeks warm. Kimi thought aloud that she did not know what to think of that guy and looked up at Panda, whose dark-ringed, sea-foam eyes were watching Kohaku and Naruto. Kohaku was curled up against Naruto as they slept, their hair mixing in different shades of blonde. Kimi snuggled into Panda's chest and felt his arms tighten around her. Panda said that he thought the situation was strange. Kimi asked why and settled against his warmth. Kimi recalled that she and Gaara had lain in the fire dojo the previous night, watching the stars and the moon, because someone would not let him sleep. She said at least someone was treating Kohaku well, and noticed Gaara still looking at Naruto with a serious expression. Gaara insisted that Kohaku was like a sister to him, and Kimi smiled. She teased him about what he meant by like, and Gaara sounded confused as he tried to explain. Kimi laughed and kissed his cheek. Gaara reached out, pulled her onto his lap, and before she could think, he surprised her with a sudden, lingering kiss. They broke apart when laughter came from behind them. A small tin box had appeared. Kimi reached over, took the note taped to it, and handed the box to Gaara. The note said it was for Kimi and Panda, urged them not to eat everything, and included a playful request about a future niece or nephew, signed with love from Kohaku. Kimi closed the note and flushed. Panda's cheeks were puffed, stuffed with cookies, and Kimi poked him with a smile. Nothing serious, she thought, and waved off Gaara's irritated reaction when his sand began to stir toward the note. Kimi quickly discarded the note instead of letting it be taken. Gaara demanded to know what she had done, and Kimi stuck out her tongue at him. He smirked and moved closer as if to tease her. Kimi recoiled, hands up to keep him at bay. Kohaku laughed and explained that she had been playing a prank. Naruto dropped down beside her, smiling and waving. Kimi noticed how happy Kohaku and Naruto seemed that day. Gaara tightened his arms around Kimi when he felt sand moving at his waist. Naruto, startled, stepped forward with a defensive stance, and Kohaku gently reassured him. Kimi tried to calm Gaara by putting a hand on his cheek. He relaxed slightly but did not let go of her. He declared her as his, pulling her even closer. Kohaku responded with a fierce declaration that Kimi did not belong to anyone unless she had a ring, then teleported in front of Panda and thumped his head lightly. Kimi cringed. Kohaku and Kimi were the only ones who could do that to him. Gaara cried out in frustration and held his head. Kimi felt a shadow of anger well up, and Kohaku and Naruto exchanged worried looks before backing away. Once they were gone, Kimi looked down at Gaara, who was smiling again, and they shared a close, affectionate moment before remembering that the Chunin exams were that day. Both of them sat up in alarm. Kimi realized they had to get ready for the exams. Kohaku's POV. Kohaku shivered and admitted aloud that the moment had been frightening. Naruto, still shaken, agreed. He took her hand and together they left the training area, the great doors blending back into the surroundings behind them. Kohaku asked whether it was the doors or Kimi that would take some getting used to. Naruto hesitated, then laughed. He teased her about the bunnies dotting the bushes around the training grounds. Kohaku gave him a skeptical look and accused him of setting her up. Naruto smiled and offered a playful apology. He asked for a small favor, then leaned down and placed a quick, gentle kiss on her forehead. Kohaku was pleased but saw that he had expected more. She hugged him and pressed a kiss to his cheek instead. Kohaku then insisted that Naruto carry her on his back. He sighed but knelt down and offered his arms. Kohaku squealed in delight and climbed aboard. Naruto joked about using air to float, and Kohaku teased him about why she felt heavy. Naruto murmured that she would never be too heavy for him, and Kohaku buried her head against his back. She told him she loved him, and Naruto said he loved her too. They continued on toward the Chunin exams, ready for whatever came next. I wondered why milkshakes, then I sang the line about milkshakes bringing the boys to the yard. Naruto reacted with an exasperated comment about me, and I offered to show him how, teasing that I would have to charge. Naruto laughed and shook his head. He set me down on the floor and went to argue with Sasuke about something he had said earlier. Since we met up with Kakashi and a pink-haired friend, the others had been looking at us oddly. Sakura and Sasuke stared for a moment, then blushed and looked away. My father alternated between showing anger and a small, amused sparkle in his eyes. I asked my father, half joking, whether he was on a man party. Everyone froze, then Naruto started laughing while the others reddened. Sasuke, still blushing, asked how I could say such a thing with a straight face. I replied that it was just like how he looked like a duck's backside, which left the others protesting that it did not make sense. I stood my ground until they looked away. Kakashi announced that this was as far as he could go and disappeared in a puff. Sakura pulled me toward the doors and the other guys were already waiting. I blushed and walked with her, thinking about Gaara and Kimi and hoping they would arrive on time. The four of us pushed the doors open and found a long, empty hallway. We needed to go to the third floor, but Duckbutt seemed boring as he read the directions aloud. Naruto turned and sprinted up the stairs, and I face-bombed. Sakura suggested we follow him, and Sasuke and I nodded. It was time for the Chunin exam. We had been climbing stairs for a while, and I yawned, ready for a break. I whined to Duckbutt about how much longer it would be, prompting an irritated reaction from him. I complained that we had only been climbing for 2 minutes, and Sasuke shot an annoyed look at Naruto. Naruto offered me a treat if I would stop complaining, and when I realized the treat was Nutella I brightened and ran up the stairs. On the second level we stopped. A crowd had gathered outside room 201, watching a group of kids who appeared to be demonstrating something. I noticed a faint glimmer around the room sign and pointed it out. Naruto still did not understand, so I guided his head toward the sign to make the glimmer more obvious. When I explained that we had only climbed 2 flights of stairs and were still on the second floor, Naruto bowed his head in embarrassment while the rest of us stared. We pressed forward, but 2 kids were blocking our way. They looked familiar. Team Guy. The girl on the team adopted a fighting stance while the boy with a bandage on his nose prepared to kick. Sasuke smirked, and before the kick landed he moved in swiftly and intercepted it with a precise, non-graphic defensive maneuver that stopped the attack and earned him some appreciative attention. Sakura appeared shaken, and I gave her a teasing, exaggerated laugh to lighten the mood. Sasuke strolled up the stairs afterward with obvious pride, and Sakura and I jogged to catch up. I called out to Naruto, but there was no reply. I turned and realized we had left him behind. I ran back to him and apologized profusely. I grabbed his arm in my panic, and he steadied me so I would not fall. I apologized again with a trembling voice. He sighed and held me briefly in a comforting, steadying way. He told me he could not stay mad at me, and I smiled and shook my head quickly. Naruto pulled his head away from her neck and smiled. He looked down at her lips and she bit her lower lip. He told her she could not do what she was planning. She replied that meant he could not be mad at her. He laughed and held her a little closer, sensing a quiet spark between them. A voice cleared its throat and announced that it was time to go in. They separated and Naruto set her down slowly. She turned and saw Sasuke standing nearby. She glared. Sasuke's eyes widened. She grabbed Naruto's hand and walked past him, sticking her tongue out at Sasuke. Sasuke looked hurt and started to follow, but Naruto's stance warned him off. Naruto urged her that they would be late. She shrugged and climbed onto his back. Naruto wondered what she was thinking and she tried to reply, but he mentally protested in a teasing way. She laughed and hid her face against the back of his jacket. He tightened his grip on her legs. There were so many people. Sakura stood shaking beside her. Kohaku patted Sakura's shoulder and slid from Naruto's back. When she stood, she regretted it. Dozens of men were staring. Naruto growled and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close and turning her away from them. He made it clear she was with him, and she leaned into his protective presence, feeling him smile against her hair. A man reached for her hair and curled a strand around his finger. Kohaku recoiled at his disheveled appearance and smell. Naruto produced a kunai and warned the man to back off. The man retreated and left the area. Kohaku smiled at Naruto. He rubbed the back of his head and smiled back. She thanked him and he returned the gesture. Sakura asked about Gaara of the Sand. Kohaku turned and saw Sakura and Sasuke talking to a white-haired man in a ponytail. When the man glanced toward Kohaku, she froze and moved behind Naruto. Naruto stiffened and scanned for danger, then took her hand and squeezed it. She steadied her breathing and reminded herself they were in the Chunin exams. The instructor entered and announced that they were now in the Chunin exams and would be punished if caught cheating. Kohaku and Naruto exchanged worried looks. Kohaku tried to stay calm. Naruto reassured her that he would be okay, and she forced a poker face, wiping away tears. She resolved not to give in to fear. When the exam papers were handed out, she read through the test quickly. Cheating was widespread in the room, but the instructor was watching for those who could gather and reproduce information without being detected. Kohaku observed and adapted. She formed a small clone and used a subtle technique to hover and observe without drawing attention. Sasuke was using his eye technique to copy the movements of the person in front of him to get answers. Kohaku drifted close and nudged the pencil, causing Sasuke to mark a wrong answer without noticing. She felt a brief, mischievous satisfaction at outwitting him and watched Sakura use flirtation to obtain answers from another examinee. Kohaku examined the student Sasuke was copying and realized he moved and answered like an experienced Umbu ninja, confident and precise. She smirked at the challenge and prepared to concentrate on the test. He was still a duck-ass. Kohaku leaned over Naruto's shoulder and linked her vision to her clone so the clone would know what to do. She flew back to her clone, and once the clone finished and Kohaku solidified. Again, the clone dissipated. Kohaku checked the last answer, sighed, and let her head fall into her arms on the desk. They had to wait for the 10th question, which the examiner would announce. Kohaku lifted her head and looked at Naruto. He was shaking, hands tangled in his hair. Naruto called out to Kohaku in her head in a sudden, explosive whisper, which made her jump. This mind-speaking would take some getting used to. Kohaku asked Naruto what was wrong, noting the confusion and worry in his voice. She wished she could sit beside him. Naruto worried aloud in her mind that he did not know any of the questions and that he did not want the team to fail because of him. Kohaku told Naruto to breathe and watched as his trembling eased into deep breaths. She reminded him that their team would face failure together, they would succeed or fail as one. Naruto thanked Kohaku and smiled at her. Kohaku smiled back, feeling a small warmth at his expression. She rested her head on her hand and Naruto let out a soft laugh before the instructor began shouting again. The instructor barked that the second exam was starting and added the crucial detail that answering the last question incorrectly would mean immediate failure and permanent disqualification from retaking the Chunin exams. Teams could drop out, but doing so would remove the entire team from the exam. A number of hands went up. Kohaku watched Naruto grow thoughtful and tense. Kohaku thought they would not need to worry about Naruto dropping out. His courage and stubbornness made that seem unlikely. A gasp behind her made Kohaku turn. Sakura was pointing forward. Kohaku followed the gesture and almost gasped herself. Naruto's hand rose, shaking but steady, until he placed it flat on the table in front of him and held it there with newfound resolve. He declared in his mind that he would not be underestimated and would not back down, that such words were unbreakable because they were part of his ninja way. Kohaku smiled as the nervous students who had been afraid now stood firm and confident. She thought Naruto would make an excellent leader someday. In her heart she affirmed that he would one day become Hokage. The instructor looked around for any more dropouts, found none, and then congratulated the students, announcing that they had passed. Surprise flashed through the room, then relief and celebration as everyone stood and cheered. Naruto looked at Kohaku, crossed the table and stood beside her. He exclaimed that they had done it. Kohaku laughed. In the bustle of celebration, Naruto took her by the waist and spun her in a rapid, joyful circle before setting her down and pulling her into a quick, friendly embrace. Naruto whispered his thanks to Kohaku for her help earlier. Kohaku blushed. They shared a brief, cheerful moment together before the instructor resumed explaining why they had passed. Kohaku asked the instructor why they had passed, and the instructor went into full detail. Kohaku glanced back at Naruto and found him already watching her. Her cheeks warmed. She nervously fiddled with his collar. Kohaku tugged his collar playfully, bringing their faces close, and then withdrew into a short, encouraging exchange. Naruto tightened his hold protectively for a moment, and then the moment broke when something crashed through the wall, announcing an abrupt interruption accompanied by chaotic shouting about apples, Nutella, and cheese. The celebration paused as everyone turned to the source of the commotion, and life in the exam hall shifted back into its unpredictable rhythm. Another turning point, a fork in the road. Time grabbed Kohaku by the wrists and directed her where to go. She thought of the lines about making the best of a test, not asking why, learning lessons in time, and hoping someone had the time of their life. She started the long instrumental frame in her head but was cut off by Duckbutt. Duckbutt commented in his monotone that her performance had been pretty good. Kohaku thought angrily that she wanted to punch him, but Naruto praised her exuberantly and Kohaku felt her face heat with embarrassment. She noticed a puddle behind Kakashi and found it strange since it had not rained, but before she could wonder further 2 men appeared and wrapped Kakashi in a metal spiked chain. A voice declared 1 down, and the scene shifted. Kohaku watched sharp training kunai fly to opposite corners of the room they had been contained in while someone held up a large sign. She raised an eyebrow at the woman standing in front of it and then glanced at Naruto, who shrugged and rested his head against hers. The second instructor announced that she was overseeing the second part of the Chunin exams in a loud, brash voice. Kohaku thought the woman was unpredictable, and she briefly lost herself in distracting daydreams before a dark object whizzed past her face and snapped her back to the moment. A kunai lodged in the tree next to her. The metallic scent hung in the air. When Kohaku scanned the area, she saw a thin line of blood on Naruto's face. He winced and touched it. He began to call Kohaku's name, but before he could finish, the woman stepped forward and, with a swift motion, wiped the blood from Naruto's cheek. Kohaku watched the woman with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. The woman admitted that she liked the taste of blood. Kohaku concluded that the woman was a vampire and that the situation had just become stranger. Kohaku moved to shield Naruto and he wiped his cheek on her shirt, prompting her to sigh and hope the stain would not hold. The instructors reiterated the rules of the Forest of Death. Teams needed to get 2 scrolls, Earth and Heaven, to the other side in one piece. Each team would be assigned 1 scroll, and the other could only be taken from another team's member. Kohaku drifted in and out of attention until she was pulled forward and told that only 3 people could be on a team, so she would join with another extra participant. The instructor revealed Kimi as Kohaku's teammate. Kohaku ran to Kimi and hugged her warmly. Kimi returned the greeting with a quick squeeze and urged Kohaku to move toward the gate before anything went wrong. They approached Gate 13. Kohaku noted with a quick look that Team 7 was at gate. She slipped into a ready stance and tried to steady her rattled thoughts. Kohaku heard a whisper in her mind asking if she really loved them, and she looked around for the source, uncertain whether it was her imagination. She called out to it inwardly but got no answer. Kimi urged her to hurry and then ran through the gate into the forest. Kohaku dashed after her and the gate slammed shut behind them. The forest felt vast and eerie. Kimi chided Kohaku for being slower than Naruto, and Kohaku sighed but moved to catch up. She leaped between trees to get a better view and to keep up the pace. Being agile felt natural. She straightened her shoulders and resolved to find the scrolls and then search for her rest of her team. Kimi called Kohaku over and Kohaku jumped to her side. Kimi pointed to 2 spots directly beneath them. The moment stretched as they prepared to descend into the unknown of the Forest of Death. Kohaku asked if they were frozen, and Kimi confirmed they were. Kohaku laughed as they both jumped down. A group of 3 men stood motionless while a rolled scroll lay before their leader. Kohaku bent to pick the scroll up and read the label, Scroll of Earth. Kohaku wondered if that was what the scroll did when opened. Kimi nodded and kicked one of the men, then announced their victory with a dramatic cheer. Kimi called Kohaku's name, and Kohaku told her to be quiet with a pout, sticking out her tongue. Kimi pointed out that she was right beside her, then held out her hand. Kohaku placed the scroll in Kimi's hand and gave a small celebratory hop. Kohaku noted that it had been easier than expected and that they already had both scrolls. Kimi said she already knew where Gaara was, and Kohaku spotted a trail of sand curling around Kimi's leg. Kohaku smirked and folded her arms, feeling confident about finding their teammates. Kimi promised to find out where Naruto was and teased Kohaku with a playful look that made Kohaku blush. Kohaku told her to stop with a flustered reply. They agreed to meet later at the finishing house, and Kimi walked off. Kohaku leapt into the trees to scout from above and avoid oncoming traffic. Thinking like a target, Kohaku listened for clues. The faint clatter of kunai and the sound of a nearby river guided her. As the sun dipped, she realized the river would be the best place to look and hurried toward it, excited to see her team again. She muttered that the task was harder than it looked and used shadow clone jutsu to help with the search. Perched on a branch, Kohaku recognized a familiar voice. She peered over the edge and spotted a blonde boy in the river, a black-haired figure on the bank, and a pink-haired teammate tending a fire. Kohaku pushed off and landed in the water behind the blonde. The blonde, Naruto, startled and slipped, falling into Kohaku and knocking them into the shallow water. Naruto lifted his head, bright-eyed and smiling, and greeted Kohaku warmly. Kohaku laughed, pushed him off, and stood up, complaining that she was soaked. The moment that followed was awkward but brief, and then they quickly exchanged friendly greetings. Naruto wrapped his jacket around Kohaku to warm her and helped her to the bank, setting her by the fire. He moved to put on dry clothes and came back to sit beside her. Sakura explained that she had moved toward the river to find food as night approached, and Kohaku accepted a whittled stick from her as a welcome-back gesture. They all settled by the fire. Kohaku teased one teammate with a childish taunt about his appearance, and the others laughed. Naruto's stomach growled, prompting good-natured teasing, and then someone playfully scooped Kohaku up and set her down beside the fire. Everyone laughed together, sharing the relief of being reunited. Later, Kohaku arrived near Sasuke and immediately told him that he was being annoying. Sasuke glared at her, and Kohaku threatened to laugh if his ego grew any further. She then teased Sakura with an absurd, childish image of Sasuke, which sent Sakura into a dreamy, distracted state. Sakura protested when Kohaku poked fun at Sasuke, but her reactions were clumsy and sleepy from earlier events. When Sasuke suddenly announced that he needed to relieve himself, Sakura told him not to do it in front of the others, and Sasuke grumbled his way into the bushes. A few minutes later he returned looking much better and announced he felt relieved. But Kohaku sensed something was wrong. The connection she felt with Naruto before had vanished. She told the others that something about Naruto was not right, and her concern led her to reach for a kunai, ready to investigate. Kohaku felt Sasuke stiffen beside her and saw his gaze harden on Naruto. Naruto had suggested hiding the scroll in exchange for being given it. Sasuke asked for the password, repeating the question with a look of uncertainty and saying that if the other were the real Naruto he would know it. Naruto began to answer, and Kohaku hissed and struck him in the face. Sakura screamed. Kohaku explained that it was obvious he was not Naruto. Sakura stepped back. The imposter rose and wiped his face. Kohaku stated that the real Naruto would not know the password and glared. The imposter smirked and remarked that Naruto was probably dead. Kohaku growled, drew a kunai and raised it in a defensive position. Sasuke called Kohaku's name. As Kohaku turned, Sasuke moved quickly and incapacitated the man, and Naruto stepped forward. The two men had taken away her chance to fight. A mysterious voice assured Kohaku that she would have her chance later. Kohaku blinked and wondered what was happening. The mysterious voice said she would know in due time. Kohaku clenched her fists, demanding answers now. The voice told her to calm down and that they would speak after the test, warning that she might be powerless if she did not listen. Kohaku protested that she could do great feats of power, but the voice offered no further explanation. Naruto pointed at the tower and announced they had reached it. The others noted how quickly they had arrived after the fight. Kohaku realized that speaking with her friends had taken up time and laughed it off as a lapse. Sasuke asked if she was all right, saying that she had been fighting in taijutsu. Kohaku nodded and tried to shake off the oddness of hearing the voice in her head. Naruto ran ahead into the tower and the others followed. Kimi swung up from a branch to the level above. Kohaku told them she had to go and signaled, transporting herself to the level above. Kimi teased Kohaku for taking too long and sat cross-legged with a snack. Kohaku rolled her eyes as she opened the door to their small room. She examined a piece of writing that was missing a few words and was difficult to read. Kimi reminded her that they had to open the scrolls. Kohaku pulled out an earth scroll while Kimi produced a heaven scroll. Kimi removed the seals and began peeling back the paper. Kohaku copied the actions. They discovered that one scroll was a summoning scroll. Kimi remarked that Kohaku had stated the obvious. Smoke drifted as something appeared from the scroll, and their sensei Kakashi materialized, greeting them and commenting that he had to explain the scroll on the way. Kimi acknowledged that they had already figured out some of it. Kakashi congratulated them on passing the first part and prepared them for the next stage. In an instant they were transported and assembled in formation as an instructor began explaining the pre-finals. The instructor announced that the first competitors would be Sasuke, Uchiha, and Yoroi Akato. Kohaku realized she needed to stop spacing out. Sasuke and his opponent sized each other up and then engaged in fast, intense combat. The fight unfolded in a flurry of martial exchanges and acrobatic moves, stylized and energetic like an action sequence from an animated duel. Eventually both were thrown to the mat and rendered unable to continue. The match ended decisively. Kohaku watched, stunned by the speed and spectacle. Naruto turned to Kohaku with a puzzled expression and asked if she had heard the strange remark about having their chance. He nodded slowly without taking his eyes off her, and Kohaku inwardly fretted about what it might mean for her future. A man nearby rolled his eyes and declared that it was ruined as I leaned against the rail. I cursed the strawberries under my breath and watched as Sasuke and the other fighter were dragged off the fighting court. The announcer said that the next people to fight would now be picked. I looked at the board and read the name with curiosity, Kohaku Naruto. Maybe he was foreign. A big, muscular man stood and made his way down to the arena. I felt bad for whoever his contestant would be. Naruto gripped the rail and looked pale, Sakura seemed on the verge of tears, and Kakashi gave me a sympathetic look. I asked what was wrong, and Sakura shakily pointed toward the board. My eyes followed her finger to the large black letters, Kohaku Naruto. Now I see, I thought, pushing off the floor and dusting myself. Naruto shouted that this wasn't fair and that Kohaku couldn't go down there. He warned that Kohaku would be slaughtered. I clenched my fists. I hated being underestimated. I replied with as much sarcasm as I could manage that I could take care of myself, and I jumped down from the railing before anyone could stop me. I walked to the center of the arena to meet the towering opponent, who smirked. I returned the look with boredom. The instructor coughed into his hand and reminded the competitors that they wanted a clean fight and that no one should try to kill their opponent, then signaled for us to start. The two of us bowed, then began circling each other. The man mocked me, warning that he might mess up my face and that I would not need it afterward. I retorted that he could not catch me, and he sneered. I snarled inwardly and clenched my fists. Stop it, I told myself. Anger makes you unfocused. Focus. A sudden voice in my head surprised me, but I hid the reaction by switching fighting positions. The man growled and lunged so fast that he struck the wall behind me with enough force to leave a mark. He was terrifyingly quick. I jumped away as he collided with the wall, then flipped and spread my hands. I let my chakra surface and coat my hands and forearms with an iron-like sheen. The big man turned and charged again, this time with kunai. He let out a fierce battle cry and pulled his arm back to strike. I drew my hands to my chest and pushed outward, catching his wrist and throwing him to the ground. He sat dazed for a moment. A dark urge whispered to finish him. I felt something surge through my veins, an intent to end it immediately. The man's face twisted and a memory tugged at me. I didn't want to kill him. The urge repeated itself, stronger. I pushed forward and noticed a faint purple haze gathering around me. The man looked up at me in fear. I felt a smile form on my face but resisted it. I leapt, climbed into the air, and drove my arms into what should have been a decisive strike. My feet landed as momentum carried my fist down. Stop, I told myself. I didn't want to kill him. Then stop yourself, the other voice replied. I gritted my teeth and forced my arms to halt before they could strike the man. The motion was fast and my fist still knocked the wind out of him. Tears pricked at my eyes as the purple smoke dissipated with my chakra. I apologized quietly and wiped a tear from my cheek. The man wheezed on the ground, then offered a weak smile and, to my surprise, asked to be called princess. I sat in stunned silence. Everything passed by in a blur. A girl jumped down from the balcony, offered a polite smile and a small, barely noticeable bow, then helped the big man onto a stretcher. The woman leaned close and said to call if I needed them. I turned to ask what she meant, but she had already started to walk away. I felt myself sway and was led back to my seat, watching the rest of the fights through muffled announcements. The instructor stated that the winners would go on to the final test later, after time to train. Before I knew it, I was outside in one of the many training fields around the village, alone with my thoughts. What was the purple haze? Why had I wanted to kill that man? Who were those people? An inner voice sneered that I was one of the most pathetic humans the speaker had ever met. I blinked and looked around. The voice continued, saying that my other vessels knew who I was, that I was a typical blonde and weak. I squeezed my fists. I'm not weak, I thought. The voice dismissed me, saying it had seen me fail to help my comrades and questioning whether I had my own chakra, hinting that my ability to bend elements was pathetic. It said I was nothing, that I would never belong with them, that I would never be strong, and that the idea of me being a ninja was a joke. Enough, I shouted and stood up. I forced all my chakra out of my body, letting every emotion unspool and fade until I sagged back down to the ground. A spectator commented that it was impressive. She turned toward the voice and looked back. A man stood there with light blue hair and cold blue eyes. He said it was about time. She cried out asking who he was. He rolled his eyes and crouched down in front of her and told her she was a member of the Moonlight Clan and should have known. Stammered in confusion when he confirmed that he was hers and leaned back on her hands. He explained that the Moonlight Clan had a ritual of housing demons, serving as temporary vessels until a permanent host could be found, which normally did not happen until age 16. He introduced himself as Rin, the Calamity Demon, and her demon partner, examining his fingers with bored detachment. She insisted that could not be true and looked down at her hands. He told her she was different from other Moonlight members, born with a demon inside her, which was unusual for a baby. He added that she would have been told about it so she would not grow up thinking herself evil, since she had a history of destructive outbursts and had once burned down buildings during tantrums. When she asked why her uncle had done what he did, Rin asked if she knew the reason and then laughed. He said her uncle had not set out to destroy the Moonlight Clan. He had intended to kill only one person, her, and the rest had been in the way. She shook her head and felt warm tears on her face. Rin moved on without dwelling on it. He told her she needed to practice bending her elements right now. She demanded answers first. He responded that she would get answers when she did as he commanded, insisting that they had work to do. She asked what work, and he repeated that she should bend first. When she insisted on knowing before she tried, he said the task was the one her mother had given him. Frustrated, she sighed and stepped into the training field. She held her hands out and tried to draw on the last of her chakra to lift the earth, expecting a simple task. Nothing happened. She concentrated harder, still nothing. It felt as if everything had been drained from her. Rin observed that this confirmed his suspicion and tapped her arm. She knocked his hand away and tried again, forcing chakra from her limbs. Her arms trembled and a sharp pain ran through them, but she refused to give up. Rin pushed her hands down and announced that she would not be able to do anything that way, explaining that she had lost the ability to bend the elements with chakra. Panic rose in her at the thought of all those hours of training wasted. She ripped her arms free and cried that she could not fight like this. Rin shouted that he was there for that very reason and told her she was not hopeless. She could still use her ninja techniques, but she would have to find them again. She began to panic, a fear she had not felt since childhood. Rin struck her cheek sharply enough to leave it stinging and commanded her to calm down, warning that he had no patience and that she had better behave. She nodded, still in shock, and followed him when he said they needed to talk while they walked. They circled the perimeter of the training field twice in silence before she asked why she could not use her ninja techniques. Rin said it was because those abilities had not been her true potential. He explained that prophecy foretold that once every few generations an heir of the Moonlight Clan would develop the golden elements lightning, acid, and void, and that she was that heir. To unlock those powers she would have to undergo training, and Rin, as her demon partner, would be the one to coax those powers out. She asked why he was no longer in her head, and he said that while she relearned her skills she needed someone who knew her to protect her. She accepted his answer with a wry thought about the irony of being protected by the very being who might make her life difficult, and then she noticed a dark shape in the distance. She hurried closer and realized it was a person. She called out and moved the woman's black hair away from her face. The woman's face was covered in bandages. She groaned and mumbled her name, Danny, before going limp. Kohaku reached for her and felt the woman's body go slack. Healers arrived and one of them placed Danny on a stretcher, lifting her carefully and beginning the short walk to the hospital. Kohaku watched as they carried her away. One of the healers thanked Kohaku and told him they would take care of her. Kohaku rubbed her arm nervously and looked toward where a girl had been carried off. One of the rescuers looked up and gave Kohaku a light smile. He assured her that they would let them know if anything changed. Kohaku nodded and watched them walk away, then turned to Rin and asked what they should do next. Rin rolled his eyes and told her that she should train. Kohaku huffed in response. Rin suggested they start immediately but reminded her they would have to leave early the next day and it would not be a good idea to go now with the girl still lying there. Kohaku wanted to ask why but held back, uneasy at the thought that whatever had harmed the girl might still be nearby. Kohaku said that was fine and started back toward the house they shared with Naruto, explaining that she was hungry. Rin groaned but made no protest as Kohaku headed for ramen, a warm bed, and a hug from Naruto's small comforts she needed after a day of surprises. Rin muttered that he did not understand why Kohaku put up with Naruto, and Kohaku defended him, insisting he was not a brat but a sweetheart. Rin grumbled back, and then suddenly shouted for her to stop invading his mind. When she arrived home, Kohaku called out that she was home, although Rin had already told her the house was empty. She checked the counter and picked up a note from Naruto explaining that he would be out for a while because he had a master to train him. Kohaku told Rin she did not need to use the bond to find Naruto because he was a grown man and she did not know how to use it anyway. Rin sighed and flopped onto the couch, muttering under his breath. Rin reminded Kohaku that they needed to pack, since they were leaving early the next morning. Kohaku pulled ramen from the fridge and asked how early, joking that she could not get up before 9. Rin answered that they would leave around 3, which made Kohaku choke on her ramen. She put her dishes away and set about washing them, determined to get her strength back and stop feeling so weak. When she finished, she feigned a yawn and accepted that they should try to sleep if they planned to rise so early. Rin lay down on the couch and faced away as Kohaku turned out the light. She went to her room, changed into pajamas, and climbed into bed. She stared at the ceiling and wished for sleep to come quickly so she could avoid another lonely night. Usually she and Naruto would play games or try to make each other laugh until they fell. She rolled onto her side and looked out the window, letting her hand rest in front of her, feeling how cold the house was without Naruto there.